The boy tosses his cigarette to the ground and prepares the lifeless drone. I'm clipping its wings like a pet barn owl. He dons the glasses, synchronizing his soul, causing the owl to leap into the air with heavenly ascent, stretching its wings free, magnificent. It sees rodents in the field. Rodents. I see those fucking rodents. Knowing our food, soiling the land with their explosive droppings. I must feed. They will have children, then children of children, then children of children of children. The owl swoops down majestically with perfect precision. At the last moment, the rodent turns and locks eyes with the owl. The rodent is gone. So is the owl, as the boy coldly prepares another. Okay, so this was a reading of Hear the Barn Owl Screech, a poem by Josh Datko. And today I have him in the podcast so we can talk a little bit about his work. How are you, Josh?
Doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a nice I like this one that you did with Will, and it's quite an honor to be on with you right now.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation. I think it's going to be really good. I don't know if you want to give like a brief introduction of who you are and what your work revolves around a little bit.
Sure, yeah. I am yeah, so I'm Josh Datko. I mainly run this cassette. I got all this started when I ran this cassette magazine called Bitpunk FM. And then I realized poetry would work out really well on the tapes. And that's really what kind of drove me down a poetry angle. And that was about 7 months ago. I consider myself quite new to all this. Before, I consider this my third life. So my first life, I was in the military for 10 years. Drove a submarine around the world. And then I was sent to Afghanistan. And then a second 10-year life, I was an electronics hacker. Hacked into all sorts of things. And then this is my third life. So this is how I think of things.
Yeah, and I find that really interesting that your work has this kind of cohesive element among these different aspects of you, that you really try to blend this into a really coherent whole. Like you have like, of course, like the anti-war poems, you
Mm-hmm.
have like the media techie approach to things and this newfound aspect of
Mm-hmm.
poetry, and it all kind of blends in a really interesting way. And I also, like the first thing I really liked about your work was that like you came into poetry from this kind of musical, more
Mm-hmm.
audio perspective, because that's something I really like and try to focus too on.
Yeah, that has been super fun. I just for me, it there's such a big difference with the reading and then hearing it kind of spoken. And it really, what I noticed for me is I'm really trying to slow things down. And so on the phone and even on a browser reading people's poems, it's just the tendency is just to scroll so quickly. You really, and by forcing a reading or a listening, the 2x button's just that much extra effort, so you just kind of want to keep it on 1x and listen. And there's so many things you miss. And it's just, so that aspect I really, really liked. And so I tried to kind of focus on that because it's just too easy. I mean, I'm guilty of it as everybody, just see the notification, I see Benno's got a new poem and then it's like, all right, I read it. And then it's like, all right, I didn't really read it, like it's difficult.
Yeah, and it is. And here's where we can start like approaching it like from the media theory
Hmm.
perspective, because I take it that you're a Marshall McLuhan fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have kind of uh known of him for a while, but I think it really didn't click and until I started the cassette, intentionally doing the cassette. I knew of Neil Postman, who was kind of like the digital follow-on to Marshall McLuhan, and there's a couple other guys. Douglas Ruskoff has written a lot about how like this kind of evil tech things, but kind of this whole cassette thing really came across of like thinking really deeply about like the medium as the message, and it's just like on Substack and these other platforms, it's so hard to stand. It's not stand out's the right word, but really kind of not look like everybody else. And and I really wanted that. Yeah, I was thinking about audio, and I really wanted to do this thing where this wrapping in the cassette culture and everything that I loved about analog media, but in the audio form, and you could do it yourself, and you could do the own J card. Like all this stuff is like perfect for this. And so I was like, oh my god, this cassette is the perfect medium. So that and then kind of yeah, tying with the Marshall McLuhan ideas, just everything really clicked. I think so. I've been really exploring those as well.
Yeah, and I think this is like a really important aspect to consider. The medium is the message is like I think it's very relevant to almost all aspects of life, because so much of our experience of life is becoming mediated now,
Yeah.
like from everywhere. Most people probably now is expand their life through mediated mediums completely.
Yeah, it's really I kind of honed in on the digital versus analog side, but you're absolutely right. It expands way more than that. It's it's really anything from just family interactions to what you are seeing walking down the street to like what's in the city. Like it's just as McLuhan puts it, the environments are invisible. So people don't like to be reminded that this environment is affecting them. And so this is, yeah, the joke that he told, which I noticed David Foster Wallace also retold without giving credit to McLuhan, but I don't know if there's a connection there, but I see one. And it's the thing about the fish, two fish are swimming in water, and the older fish comes up and says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And then they swims away, and the fish are like, "What the hell is water?" But McLuhan told that joke. I've heard these recordings of McLuhan telling that joke way before the famous David Foster Wallace speech. But yeah, this is I think what you're hinting at here with the fact that this is this environment that we're in.
Yeah, and we have like this really strange relationship that is half aware. I mean, like most people are aware of like a lot of the dangers and like dark sides of like this increasive like technological dependence we have, but at the same time, there's kind of, I guess, like an almost like an addiction that is
Mm,
that doesn't want to be addressed. Like I know I have a problem, but I also am not sure I want to fix that. So
yes.
it's kind of hard to talk about it, because it's almost everywhere. Everybody has that problem, and yeah, like we're not necessarily sure what fixing it means yet, like as a society, because like you could very well go and become like a hermit, but like that's not like a feasible solution for almost anybody.
Yes, exactly. So, even this interview right now, like we are only doing it because of the technology. So there is, and I think it is that, this is why I think, like also David Foster Wallace's kind of ideas are so prevalent in this is that there is an addiction aspect. You go on to Substack and you want to see, I was just talking with someone yesterday who was kind of complaining that, he sees the open rate on Substack for his work, and N percentage reads it without clicking like, N plus whatever X clicks like, and then fewer people comment. And the comment I made to him was like, would you be happier if a bot just clicked everything and said, great work? Like what's the point of doing this? Is it to get the likes, or is it to actually develop these kind of relationships. And so I think that's where, um, yeah, I think it is a very complicated thing because it's so much, it's so stimulating. It is so just completely overwhelming that it's hard to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. It's yeah.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why, like with Marshall McLuhan, like I find that like the medium is a message in a way it's wrong, but in a way that it's really suggestive. Like
Mhm.
because like a lot of his work is precisely terming almost like these poetic terms. That
Yes,
like you
yes.
kind of have to figure out, and like this would classically be paralleled by the discussion between form and content, right? And but like part of the, I guess, the origins of media theory is having these mediums that are so powerful, where it starts to become more important how it's presented than what
Hmm.
it's really saying. So you have like these almost empty form things like pop culture that is just like regurgitating and doing these pastiche of
Hmm.
forms that really have no content. So the message does become the medium in those cases, right?
Yeah. It I just the thing you said there reminded me of something before where McLuhan also talked about that even if you become a hermit, you can't escape the effects of media. So I mean, it's like there's no escaping. It is this thing, and so if I take like um so in some sense, especially when I read some of your stuff where it's just like these crazy, that's like it's there's just something else going on there. But to have it on Substack is almost like, there's like it's crippling in a sense. Because like if this was, I mean, I could see it, you know, not and it's not necessarily just paper, but it's like if this was like on a piece of bark, like etched, some crazy thing where it's like it has to be the fact that I'm seeing this digitally is like really, I feel uncertain, especially with your stuff, but there's also other people I've noticed where it's like it really just cripples it. It could be leaping off the page, and the fact that I'm just looking at the screen while I'm getting a notification, while this is just, it almost feels now, negligence is not the right word, but it detracts from it, which is such a shame, I feel.
Yeah, it's something that I've tried to become aware, and that's why, like I've tried also to do more these collaborative efforts that all adds dimensions that kind of try to make it like more like people take more time into it,
Yes.
like but it's not easy when you're fighting against, like the intrinsic impositions that the medium, Substack, internet, screens all impose upon you. And it is a difficult balance to achieve. Like I've also tried to, I've written a little bit and studied like how the cybernetic aspects, like
Hmm.
how we, through software, through apps, they are designed in certain ways almost as mental patterns. So you can
Yes.
definitely design almost like mental illness
Yes.
in these kind of like morbid patterns that kind of like just reward behaviors that are not really positive, not healthy.
Yes.
And well, we're kind of in this like difficult battle because it's definitely something we got to deal from the inside in a way, like it's just like a part of our existence now, but also in a way that maybe we can from the inside break those inherent patterns that are kind of made addictive, like try to
Hmm.
make people interact differently with these mediums, but that requires effort and most people don't want to do that.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a couple comments there. So one, yeah. So I've noticed this with you. I mean, just because Substack is so limiting, right? So like, what can you do? You can change the font, and so like but like if this is all you can do, changing the font like is also kind of like, all right, what's going on? That is a way of cooling down. Because it's like, why are these crazy font changes in there? And for me, the way I basically see this is I kind of I although I'm enjoying Substack and I like what's going on, I don't think that's like my primary thing. I want people to get the cassettes. Like, so I am really, it's like I see Substack as like a nice kind of water cooler. There's lots of cool things. There's really lots of things that are nice about it. But it's like the real thing I'm doing is this cassette thing and getting people off of that. And obviously, does not everyone does do cassettes, but like, even if it's a book, I'd rather like, Will, for example, said, "Hey, I wrote this book. I put it on Amazon. I bought it right then." And then there was another guy who I met on Substack who is a visual artist, and he's like, "Hey, I designed this cassette cover." I was like, "Just give me the link." I bought it. Like those things I will now forever associate with those people much stronger because there's this physical object. I play the cassette, I see the book on his shelf, and it's like, oh, those are Will's poems. And so I think ultimately it's like you got to get, I kind of think you got to, I like Substack for the networking aspect, even though it sounds like a corporate buzzword, but it's like getting people to kind of get off of it is also, I think, how you differentiate and just get people to really appreciate it. And that is hard. And then the last thing is that I did try to experiment with some of these, how to push the Substack medium. The first one is the voiceover, which I just thought it was, I was like, it's a complete abuse of the voiceover function to put a like song in there, which I love because like it says voiceover, and here we are dropping like poems with crazy backgrounds. So that to me is the ultimate one of a very McLuhan like move to just drop that stuff in there. And then it's like I tried to do one where I just made the person scroll forever. I think I called it infinite scroll. And it was just like, I'm just going to make someone scroll down their phone. And like, how do you, and yeah, I feel, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm sure people have read it and are like, okay, this is what, this is kind of annoying, but but it's annoying to make the environment known. And so when you point those things out, it does, it does rub people. They don't like being, I think people ultimately don't like being made aware of their environment.
I'm not sure. Maybe it depends.
Mm.
I guess. Like I think every great master, like every great art masterpiece, like in some ways, very conscious of the medium it's using. Like
Mhm.
and exploits those aspects to its benefit, right? And so I think like there's this balance that is necessary, like between form and content, and definitely, like figuring out well what fits well in Substack and what doesn't, like there's content I have that I'm, that yeah, I would probably have to put in a book because if I put it in a Substack post, like people are going to scroll past it quickly. And
Mhm.
if I want to write something more difficult, more challenging, people are not going to give it like the attention it needs in that medium. It will probably have to be something like a book, like a physical
Yeah.
book that involves it, or even just like a paid post. Everything that just changes the aspect through which you approach that piece, like can help. And it's not even because of the money. It's because if you pay for something, you're gonna approach it with like more attention, like with more,
Yeah.
commitment. It's like an act of commitment, which is so important. Like with your cassette, like if you're
Yeah.
gonna choose, I'm gonna listen to this cassette. It involves like all these physical aspects, buying the cassette, like
Hmm.
put it in on. You cannot just like switch artists if you don't like, like the
Yeah.
one you're listening, or even tracks. There's like a certain like mechanical impositions to your attention that makes it like a more rewarding experience.
Yeah. That's interesting. That it's interesting what you said about the paid post because there's so yeah, I do feel bad because I basically cannot read anything but poetry on Substack because like when there's so many great fiction writers, but it's like when I see a fiction post and it's on my phone, I just can't. And some of it I can tell this is really good. Like I can I'm like I'm skimming it, and I'm like this is going to be good, but like I can't. I just cannot. I can't do it. Like I've always loved physical books, and I can't. It's very very difficult for me to, especially when the work of fiction, to engage with it on my phone, and it's just you're absolutely. And so, but the paid one is. I never thought about the paid post like that. So the way I come about it is it's very much I'm using like what is known as kind of a value for value model. So I purposely give everything for free, and then have the paid thing set up, but I'm like I make no prom. You will get nothing extra. Like you it's completely thing. And so I've seen the paid thing is interesting because there's also debates on how to set that up. But I do think I agree with you that which I think you're saying because you can make some posts paid. Is that what you're hinting at? Like it's like I can on a per post basis
Yeah,
you may
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so that is interesting. I didn't have not considered that because that is something like all right, now this is if it's worth charging for, is it worth this is there is a it does make you think about the relationship a little bit differently. I do agree.
Yeah, because like it's just like of course there's like a monetary aspect that you would like, like you find support for what you
Mhm.
do, but like just on a on a way of how you're gonna shape the attention of the reader,
Mhm.
it becomes a matter of like this post would not be good if it was free, like because
Yeah.
you're not gonna pay attention enough to it. And there are posts that are better free, something that can be very short but very
Mhm.
striking, and
Yeah.
you know that even though you can read it like in that kind of like a flow of like
Yeah.
random links, you're still gonna get out of something out of it, and hopefully it might make you stop a little bit, which is what I
Yeah.
like, this kind of like and why poetry can be good, like
Mhm.
at least at that, in this kind of format I'm talking about, like something that can be easy, and you can like scroll, I guess, through, but
Yeah.
hopefully in a way that you find something that makes you stop at something, that you find something striking, and it makes you take your time and actually like sit with it, like. And
Yeah. Well, this is also another McLuhan quote is that has said he doesn't see why everything he says shouldn't be like controversial. Basically, basically he's like everything I say should be a shock value, and he's like you can't compete in an electronic age. If it's not a shock value, how do you get someone's attention? And this was 1960s you know so I mean taken to an extreme we have like Twitter, and then when everything's a shock value nothing is, but there is some truth about that. Yeah, I'm still noodling this paid because I do because part of me is I really dislike paywalls, and but I'm think the way, but I've never really thought about it in like the per post method, and I guess to a certain degree I think, I give anyone a cassette for free that will just send me a postcard. But, one could argue that's just a form of paywall with more steps. So maybe I shouldn't be so dogmatic about paywalls.
yeah, and it's like of course it's something that it's kind of hard to gauge, like
Mhm.
but like that's kind of like the objective in a way, like to, yeah, it should be funnels towards like higher attention experiences, whether that's like buying a book, like getting a cassette,
Mhm.
or like you're
Yeah.
accessing like paid content that you should like convince somebody that to access forms that are a commitment based attention,
Mhm.
not just like an entertainment based attention that is trying to just go through as much as you can, because yeah, we're like in a sense like a lot of the work everybody has to do in like whether it's artists or every new business, you have to engage with social media, and in a way that it's that there's almost like with the onslaught of AI content, and in general just like huge amount of like, let's say like good content in general,
Mhm.
not to disparage any of it by itself, but like there has to be like some form of curation,
Yeah.
that allows people to navigate through what is really relevant for them. So you have to kind of like approach it from that sense, that gain maybe certain amount of trust, and it for them to you know realize that, okay, this might be worth putting that effort in.
Yeah. Okay. There's a couple things there. So the curation thing, I totally dig. I think that is completely that's the completely an unsolved problem. And this is like Silicon Valley constantly throws stupid VC money at people trying to curate whatever, spot what is Spotify but curated music. YouTube is supposed to be curated video. Like all of these things are just trying to, through algorithms or AI, everything is trying to curate something for you in the hopes, I mean, that you like it. I mean, on Substack, you after a while, I've noticed that I am probably getting anyone who posts about a cassette. Substack is showing me, like, it is very obvious. I'm like that. I'm getting just, it's like, oh, Josh likes cassettes. Someone talked about it. Boom, show it to Josh. I mean, it's definitely a thing that is going on. So that the curation aspect is you're right. There's and what it's all an attention economy, right? So it's like someone saying these things are worth paying attention to, and I think when people either do that with a manual way, well, this is what this is like editors and things kind of saying, hey, look at this stuff, or algorithmically, which has happened a lot late. People do appreciate that. Um, the other one you had the other thing they made me think of was there is, and I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, well, what's the point of growth on any of these platforms? Because, and this kind of goes into the relationship with Substack and the relationship with just kind of media in general. Because you start off and everyone starts at zero, and you start to make these connections, and the people who follow you early on, like I've had very nice discussions and back and forth and comments and things like that. And then people start to acquire more followers, more subscribers, whatever. And I think of like Ian, and it's like, so I'm a huge fan of what he's doing and all this stuff. But at some point, it's like he can no longer respond, and he said so much. He can no longer respond to all these people that is is wait, I'm getting wait. All of a sudden, I got, oh shoot, sorry, my audio from a weird tab cut in. Okay, sorry. The yeah, so he is getting so many responses that he's like, I can't respond to these. And then it's kind of like, well, what's the point? What's the point of all this? Is it to get, do you just want a one-way broadcast medium where you have all these people paying you and you cannot respond to anybody, but they just consume like your video and the poem, whatever, and then you move on? Or is it, you know, kind of like, well, I actually want to engage with people. And then there's almost like a cap. So it's like, I don't know. That question is kind of an interesting question. Like what the algorithm is definitely pushing everyone to growth because Substack makes 10% off everybody's. Substack's incentive is to get you to grow. And I kind of think that's not actually helpful. Like, if you grow and have 1 million people listening to you, but you can't even engage with them, like what have you done really? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a hard question, and that's Ian from Right Conscious, everyone, in case you don't know him. And yeah, yeah, Ian is maybe like a special case because he's like a man on a mission, right? Like
Yes,
he
yes.
really
Oh
wants
yeah.
to like spread his message as far as he can, and yeah, like it definitely come, and I think he struggles with that too, like because he's someone who definitely like tends to want to buy a lot more than he can sometimes, like
Yeah.
and it's all inspiring what he manages, like, anyways. But yeah, it's a good question, and it's not, yeah, it's one of the things, like the medium, like there's no easy answer to that. Like how do you deal um with the possibilities of the space? Because I guess, like, even making videos, like at one level, like when you when there's like almost like a sense of like established community, like
Mhm.
you can talk to a certain audience. But like part of the problem sometimes is like with the global appeal, like it can either grow from night to day, and suddenly you find yourself in a very different situation and have to deal with maybe aspects that you weren't prepared for, like maybe like hate comments or threats or like stalkers. There's all these assortment of things that come from this like a consumption culture that are not there's not, I don't think there's like an easy answer to how to approach it really, but it is a good thing to question how you want what you want to do with it. You know, it shouldn't
Yeah.
be like obvious that you should become just like as big as you can. I think that hopefully if you're like a creator, you can do it like in such a way that it sustains you. Um but yeah, there's all like personally I also like wonder about like the more like since I'm going more into theater now, like I'm trying to
Mm,
explore more of those more really ephemeral kind of local community aspects of art, like and which poetry used to be a part of, right?
mhm.
Like is it worth it to try to really compete in that sense of like kind of like just viral media with poetry, or is it
Mhm.
better to just understand it as a local community phenomenon, right? Like do live readings and like or blended like with theater and stuff like that, and just like and like the impact you can get there. I think it's a lot more lasting and profound that what you can get through like screens. And I think that's gonna become ever more obvious as
Mhm.
we approach the perfect entertainment, right? Like
Mhm.
I think theater and like the more like really local, really live aspects of art are gonna become really important
Yeah.
for just basic sanity, I guess.
I mean, but what is this but not a return to analog? This is the like this is the, it there because I think, for me this is the difference. It's like digital is all signal, no noise. And so you think of like what's the opposite of theater? I think of a Marvel movie that would complete CGI, complete effects, billion-dollar budgets, can do whatever, and that's it's what it's like everybody's on green screens, it's completely fake, and what then is in theater? It's like, well, all right, we're gonna go on a moon. Now we're on the moon, everybody. Like that's the like no budget school theater, and to a degree, and this is I think where yeah, to still bring in these McLuhan references, this is the difference. It's that films he considered to be hot media. So hot media being like you can just basically sit there and it's completely told to you and you just kind of follow along. And poetry and theater to a degree are cooler because you mind has to do work. And so this podcast, and I've noticed this too with if you want to get big on Substack, the thing you need to do if you really want to get big is just write nonfiction articles because nonfiction is but a linear structure, right? It's people can follow this conversation, they could be listening to us while doing something else. They'll be enjoying Benno and Josh talk, but there's not a lot of things they have to fill in their mind. But if you start, we start dropping poems and going this, it's going to be like, oh, okay, I got to pause this or really focus. And that's what theater is doing. That's what these local arts are doing. I have thought about it myself. I kind of like did some probing to see there's some like local things here. The only thing that I'm kind of in like a college town. And so I really like this aspect of trying to get involved, but there's also kind of like a vibe that I don't know that I'm matched with the vibe. So that I think is, uh, I haven't, I'm still willing to check them out, but I've also been a little like skeptical because it's like, I have these preconceived notions of what they're looking for. And it's, probably not what I'm going to go on stage and do. So,
Yeah, yeah, and it's also part of the problem of how we now structure communities, like with
mhm,
this hyper individualization to the internet. Like we really belong more to like niche communities on the internet. It's really hard to then like at a local place like find some form of cohesion, right? Because everybody's
mhm,
gonna be like um tribalized by now, like either politically or like I think there's very few places that's maybe more rural areas, like that
Mhm.
still maybe through religion or something else have a more coherent aspect culturally to themselves. But yeah, it's something that is quickly gonna be like everywhere, like where you end up only finding people you can really relate to through the internet, right? Because we have
Mhm.
hyper, it's like a kind of a loop back thing, that you find with all the options, you start like really specializing, like
Yeah.
subcultures.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, it's very, uh, even like in my community, like but my kids are in elementary school, and so I'm kind of involved through that elementary school, the parents and stuff like that. But had it not been through that school and through like my kids who are basically forced to become a community of local, the the internet school didn't really work out, I think, during COVID. But so they're forced to go to school with people that live next to them, and as a result, the public schools in the United States are still, I think, one of the few things that forces a community. Otherwise, you know, I work from home. I'm here. I really have no strong super ties. So it does, it does make it this. It's this double edged sword of like, well, you can now find this internet community of crazy, people doing poetry on Substack that then if I walk down the street and it's like, hey, you want to read this poem, like I'll get, I'll get no, that it's there's nothing more humbling than doing face to face things of trying to, like, I would go sometimes to these conferences and try to give out these cassettes, so I really get dolled up. I put on eyeliner, I wear like crazy leather jacket, and I just go in with a briefcase that's got other things. And it is definitely a different feeling trying to get someone total stranger face to face, get them kind of like, what do you do? Like, why are you wearing this crazy thing? I mean, I would recommend that people should do it, if not for the performance art aspect of it.
Yeah, I think and there's the problem is a problem of balance, really, because a lot of the things like Substack and like social media are not inherently bad. The problem is when they become like kind of absolute, in a sense, like we don't have like the capacity, and they're not built for that, like to balance like online life with like real life, to put
Mhm.
it like in that dichotomy, right? Like the problem with a lot of technology like electricity and all these things is that you're permanently hooked to it, right? Like if like the problem with phones is not necessarily almost nothing inherently to it. The problem is that you're always connected. You're always with it.
Mhm.
Like if we had like some sort of like like material restriction to say like maybe you get 2 hours of internet a day, like or 2 hours of phone a day, like that most of the problems associated with it would disappear. Like when I was living in my family's ranch, like it had no phone signal, it had no internet, no nothing, and I would just like go like once a week. Like I would have a list of the things I wanted to research and check on the internet, download books, etc. And like that's the healthiest I like my relationship has been with technology. Like it's incredible how little you actually have to do, in terms of
Yeah.
like internet and stuff like that. But like that's it's kind of the problem. We get sucked into things that even though they're good, they're not necessarily aligned to our growth and to what our objectives are. Like there's
Yes.
not
Yeah.
even a problem of quality.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I like this. This was like dial up days for me. Like just, looking forward to whatever you were. Yeah, this is, but this is where, in that dial up era, the tools were set up that way. So you had bulletin board systems that would collectively batch all the messages. And so when you got online, it was optimized to like, okay, download all these things before your parents will need to use the phone. And it was all waiting for you. So like it was very much geared, the systems that were around back then were geared to that kind of batching of this curation. Really, it really what it was this curation. And so here, yeah, the tool that's been abandoned in the stream of consciousness, and so you can't It's very difficult to. I think it's very difficult. The only technology that really kind of keeps that mindset is RSS, which was like used for blogs and still used for podcasts. Where if you subscribe to these RSS feeds, you can kind of go online, grab these things, and pull them down. And it's what I is interesting to me about RSS is that because there's no corporation behind it, there's no, it's just like this protocol that exists. It's the incentive doesn't work out for all these other platforms because they're optimizing you for this continued growth. But I just that image of you trying to do this on this farm, and I mean that's like, yeah, that's I mean what a I mean what a nice image of like this is it's like going to a church on Sunday. I mean, what is it? It's like I go to there, I receive the information from a spiritual place, whether it's God or from internet ether. I download it, and then you have all week to think about it. I mean, it's very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and personally, that's a little bit like of my ideal approach to it. It's not, I'm not a Luddite in that sense.
Mhm.
I don't really think about it that way. But we do need to kind of sadly get through there right now as a really conscious effort, because I've also been involved in a lot of groups that have tried that are trying actually to kind of reconstruct the internet, like
Mhm.
things like Urbit and Keynote and other that are kind of building like a new oh, almost like operating system, but really like trying to recreate like the internet from the like
Mhm.
from on a peer-to-peer basis, right?
Mhm.
So basically return to computing in terms of like structuring everything from like personal servers, where you
Yeah.
can actually control your data, control your computation, and not be just like this, like a like these little mouth sucking like central servers, like
Yeah.
24/7.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise the user is the content. I mean, and yeah, like this kind of like, I used to was a big blogger back when that started, and to me, like I've also seen these kind of things. That's why I think like zines are coming back. I've seen, ironically, or coincidentally, people were talking about it on Substack, but there is this return of this kind of like small independent kind of press and these kind of like, hey, here's my website. This I could almost like the MySpace days. You set them up, how it looks crazy. You've got all these things, and yeah, those I think that was certainly, I think, in the spirit of the original internet when it was created, was just like everyone sets up their own little fiefdom, and you kind of like have these links. This was the hyperlink. So we've certainly, and then what gets lost though, because it's like, all right, well, you gain this kind of more individuality, you gain this kind of this peer to peer. What get lost is the the distribution or the finding of things, right? Because now it's much harder to find something. You have to spend more time finding that content than if it's fed to you by an algorithm. So it's difficult to get all of that. It's difficult to find a peer-to-peer thing that works like that where it also has very good curation. So you have to kind of, yeah, it's like that triangle. Yeah, pick two out of
Yeah,
three.
yeah. It's hard. I don't really think that we necessarily will find, like the solution of like a technological solutions to what essentially has become like very humane problems, and that are part of human almost forever. And like in a sense, to part of our problems is still this progressive way of thinking about technology. Right, where we think that like we have like this really unhealthy relationship to time, where we think like the future is better than the past always,
Mhm.
and things are slowly always getting better, when like even smarter in a way, right? When like even from the beginning, like things described like as writing are thought of like this was a great discovery that made everything better. And a lot of the times people were aware of, like the great I don't know, like Indian Brahmins, they were aware of like writing, but they weren't but they were cautious of it. Like
Hmm.
they were probably more aware of the implications of starting to commit things to writing than what we are probably right now. And like the equivalent would be like with Marshall McLuhan and his take on like the printing press, right?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
for him, it was almost like a cataclysmic event, and like from where things started to kind of like progress downwards in that like kind of technological spiral to hell, right? And
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. And then, I mean, even Socrates complained that when with writing, people's memories would weaken. I mean, this is, I mean, what a baller line from this guy. You know, like I'm glad someone wrote it down though. But I think, yeah, I think the phrase that gets tossed around kind of a little bit too cliche is like human centric. But that I think where I'm at now, having spent all this time in technology, I it is there is a limit to like what the technology can do, and I think it yeah it's I think I'm more interested now in trying to form actual like human relationships, which turns out are pretty low tech. You know, you don't really need to have a lot of technology to make a connection with another person, and that is and I also think technology can and does bring about an efficiency, but there are certain things that are just meant to be inefficient. And, you know, by trying to make things like too efficient, things happen too fast. You don't have time to process it. And it's just sometimes nice to just have really, you know, just really inefficient ways of dealing with people. And that really, yeah, I think that is one of the ways and yeah, with a lot of this analog stuff I'm looking at, that's one of the ways of just putting an upper limit of it can only do so much, you know, whereas a lot of our digital life, like it really, there are ways to speed things up much quicker, get more connections, hyper growth, you know, all these growth hacks and stuff. And it's like, well, you know, if I want to go meet 10 people in my village, I got to walk down to the square. You know, there's like a limit there, which I think is a more natural way to go back to that growth question. You know, like you were mentioning here, you can blow up in an instant. Now you don't know how to deal with it, but like it's much harder to go viral, you know, in a physical world because it's of all the natural, and so it's easier to adopt as you become the village, you know, superstar.
yeah, yeah, and it kind of manifests in like really different ways. Um, like the amount of yeah, it's interesting how our notion of fame has developed
Hmm.
alongside like notions of communication. You know, like before that, I don't know, like even you know, like I guess in maybe more like medieval ages, like the fear, like the things like fame in terms of artists were not that important, right? Like it
Hmm.
was like a more of a trade, and you could be well respected, like in the sense like of like any other trade, right? But like this notion we have now of like that thing kind of validates the artists, you know, like
Yeah.
it has become really perverse in some way, right? Where it feels like it becomes we think of it like in terms of success of art, right? Like
Yeah.
and that like art is good in terms of making it, you know, and if you don't if you're not making it, like then you know like yeah, like from the perspective of I don't know, maybe people like Van Gogh and you
Hmm.
know like that like struggled all his life, and it because it was already this kind of like very fame oriented like museum based controlled environment where like artists depend on this kind of like recognition in order to be a part of society, whereas before it was like you're I don't know the church painter and they're building a
Yes.
church and you go do your work, right? And it's something that it's public and everybody enjoys, or you're a musician and you're tied to you know like playing at weddings or at the tavern, you know, there was this really a really job like
Hmm.
aspect, a trade, you know, even with poets, right? like, and that's sort of like the aspect I want to get back, like you had like the poets like as professional jobs, and not even like at the grade that it was like in primitive times where it was like the maybe a religious figure, just like in terms of maybe bards playing at courts or at gatherings or whatever, that function almost like this form of like yeah, like a creation of content, but like also people who developing myth and like stories and all these aspects, that we don't have that now, that it's based on like making it like in terms of fame and success.
Yeah, there's so many things that you mentioned that resonate. Okay, so the on terms of like the fame and success, there is there's a weird, to me it's like, all right, so say who do I really want to make the most impact on? And for me it's like my kids, like of all the people, it's like, you know, you think, especially you think of a lot of these writers and just kind of artists, but they have really unhealthy relationships with their family. A lot of them just really not good parents, and it's kind of like, all right, so what? And it's like it's a kind of a weird thing to yeah, to have, like so I don't know who was a bad parent or not, but if you just pick anyone, there's lots of examples of this where it's like a lot of people love them for what their work they did, but they're just crappy people, right? And they were just like crappy parents, and it's like, well, what, like, is this what you want? Do you want to be kind of like loved for what you did by millions of people, or like your own kids hate you? Like what is the there's like a weird, so to me there's like a weird thing about that, because in a generation, I mean, three generations, if you, I mean, I think of, if you can't talk positively about your grandparents or your great grandparents, I mean, that you're dead. I mean, like, you're gone right from these memories. And so it's like, what a nice way just to have these kind of really positive family figures. So that's one thing I think about. The other thing you talked about is this kind of you were just like the village painter, and then you did these nice frescoes and everything, and then they were like, that's it, you made your town beautiful. I mean, this is amazing. So like, one thing I started to do, which I thought has been kind of fun, is I will call into these radio shows and I'll just like write them a little poem and just call in and and it's like, but that kind of thing, it's just like a short little rhyming 4-line thing. But I, they play the voicemail and they absolutely love it. It's just like, this person stopped to write a little poem about the show and had this thing that they talk about, and they all love it. I mean, it's just like, and what a fun way to get, like, to write for like the audience that really will appreciate it. And yeah, it's anything serious, but like, just it feels good. Like, like everybody is just injected with a little bit of positivity, and it didn't have to be some avant-garde thing. They just enjoyed the moment, and everyone felt better, and they moved on.
Yeah, and yeah, like I, in terms of like artists, yeah, like we like in an art in general, I take it, like, or sometimes talk about it in terms of like finding a balance between um what is like an individual expression in like a social output, because we, like, part of like this development of like the fame thing is like ever more concerned with like the individual and originality,
Mhm.
and like ever, and like this, and it's all about the artist, and it kind of feeds back into that, like negative loop that also can make like artists really deranged people, because they're only focused about themselves, and maybe even through drugs and stuff, like going to ever crazier limits, trying to find ever more originality, and that's where a lot of modern art kind of like vicious cycles begin, right? Because if you only care about becoming exclusive and really original, then nobody's
Mhm.
gonna understand you, and that almost becomes like a cliche sign of
Mhm.
like, I'm really good, nobody understands me because I'm so far ahead, and that's why you get crappy stuff like, like pasting a banana on a wall, or like
Right.
that, as that the crazier you can get, like the more ridiculous it gets, like the better you are. And so it's a balance, right, between finding like things that are like I describe it like through these aphorisms, like
Mhm.
write for yourself and edit for everybody, right? So
Oh yeah.
so like there's this aspect of art that it's like necessary like to get out, I guess, for all artists, like that is just like a pure expression and figuring out of things inside of yourself and in the
Mhm.
world, and like there's like this necessity, and but then like you need to kind of like bring that, and or edit it in a way that it's like can serve everybody else, right? That
Mhm.
it can be
Mhm.
understood by other people, because the two things are in a way almost opposed to each other, and like on both
Mhm.
extremes you get like really bad stuff. Like if you only care about the others, then you do stuff that like Marvel, that has
Mhm.
no inherent life, no inherent things to communicate, and it is just like this reorganization of like like random archetypes and myths, but
Mhm.
like in a way that it's really childish. And on the other extreme you get like the really tormented kind of modern poet that is writing just like incomprehensible stuff, and that only he understands and thinks
Mhm.
it's genius, right? And that's why um, like things like poetry like ended up so badly, right? Like they went too
Mhm.
far on that extreme, that it was bad for them and bad for poetry in general. Like the last generation of like good American poets, like that were like the Sylvia Plath and
Mhm.
like Ted Hughes and like all these guys. Almost everybody ended up killing themselves, like problems with
Mhm.
like really really bad lives, and like in all aspects, like, and of course that wasn't going to be sustainable, and from then
Yeah.
on, you know it hasn't been.
Yeah, and I feel some of this too because I think it's also amplified with these also algorithms. Is that especially with like the anti-war stuff? I feel you almost when a lot of people like it, or get a reaction. It's like, man, how far can I push this? Because it's to me some of that there's so and I think this is mainly one of the reasons why I think I got into poetry is a lot of the kind of like these feelings of my experience in the military are just so hard to get out through prose or talking to, and I've talked to so many people. I've told them these crazy stories I was in, and none of them really kind of capture. There's so many emotions. There's so many things tied up into this. It's such a complicated thing to discuss. That's really only through poetry I really have been able to kind of get some of that out. But when it when people really and one of them I can't remember the one at the moment, but it somehow got shared outside of Substack, and there was a Green Beret who happened to know who read it and was like, "This is the best thing I've ever read." And so like so in one sense that what like that is kind of what I'm trying to capture is these veterans who have gone through this 20 years of endless war, and to see that response, I was just like absolutely floored. But also on the same side, I feel like this pressure. It's like because when some of the ones I can do, I really have to kind of go back to those times, and it is a little bit it's painful like and to get them out and to make them to make them in a way that kind of can be relatable to even someone who wasn't in the military, which I don't think I do that well, but to it it is it's like there's kind of why I talk about the kind of suicidal aspects because one, it's a giant problem, and two, it's something I struggled with. But it's like and that if I pretended to shoot myself on a live stream, like how much further can I go? Like what? How do I top this? Like I feel there's a bit of this where it's like I like exploring it, and I think there's some things there, but it's almost I have to really pull myself back because I just can't. I can't. You know, like I can't I can if, I'm worried if I really just focus on that all the time, it would be like this is not going to end well.
Yeah, it can be complicated and rewarding, as you said, and that's kind of like the part that makes this like two aspects so difficult, because on the one hand, yet like like if you're serious about it, you'll probably end up going to deal with like the really hard aspects of life of yourself.
Hmm.
And but like there's also artists uh that focus like start going, like I think it should be like on almost like a necessity basis, like, and not necessarily like as a as a as an objective, I would say,
Hmm.
like, because there's artists that have that's like have gone and tried to just like not necessarily go in there as a way to try to figure it out, just in a way to kind of pull material, and I think that's when it kind of can become dangerous,
Hmm.
when you start treating things like materials, right? And I think that's a big risk that exists with like writers, because like how do you um, there's this tendency that can occur between writers to start living life, seeing life as material to write about, right?
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
and like especially with poetry, there's almost this aspect where you kind of like if you kind of have to at some moments like kill the writing instinct and like the writing like persona, and just allow yourself to experience it like as a human. And otherwise you not only start meddling with like feelings in the wrong way, but you can also like just start entering like unhealthy
Hmm.
perspectives. But when you can really like go into it like in a sincere way, and then like in a way that can kind of almost it's it's cathartic for yourself. And when you can like then get like the objective distance and edit it in a way that somebody else gets that experience, I think that's something so profoundly impactful that as you mentioned, like that really I don't know, I think it really pays for the all the efforts and complexities that are involved in art.
Yeah. Like I said at the beginning, this is all pretty. I'm trying to do like a Zen mind, beginner mind to this kind of whole thing because it is relatively new for me. But this, yeah, it is, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I basically think I just agree with you. It is there is kind of it also for me. I think I have been a very cynical person, and I think I hit a lot through like cynicism and just kind of, before I would tell some of the like the military stories and kind of like a fun kind of like this is crazy thing, and this is where just, but it builds up this kind of cynicism, and then trying to be able to like just break down those like scars that heal up, and then you just well, like what else? It's like if I don't know, if you can't laugh at it, you cry, and I think I'm at the point now where I'm just okay crying about it because it's just that there's really some messed up stuff. But yeah, it's been definitely a. I didn't really come into any of this with any kind of expectations, like not really knowing where any of this would go. I kind of you know, I'm here basically because I saw Ian's thing, and then he started kind of talking about this, and like I said, I was kind of already kind of poetry interested, but then once I started to really jump in on it, I started to really notice that like just the changes in myself, like how I respond to other people, and just I mean all things like for the better, really. But it's really been kind of. My wife has said I've been a much nicer person, so I'll take that as an ultimate compliment.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to hear that it has been like a positive impact. And I think in general, I think that's something that it's important to almost like. I think poetry is so essential to human beings, and I think it's a shame that it has gone the way it has gone, because like it does. It is really important in order to get like a language to talk about things in a way that transcends what is usually very limited to, right? like normal language is like basically optimized in order to make communication and coordination like simple and efficient, but there are aspects of human life where that's not the point. And I think we live in a time where it becomes ever increasingly important to be capable to have a way to address those aspects of ourselves, you know, as because people don't, yeah, are not capable of dealing with the complexities of emotional life, of mental life, you know, like and even like where it might transcend like even to the spiritual aspects, you know,
Mhm.
like people taking like I don't know, too much psychedelics or drugs and stuff like that, and then, you know, like not able to interact normally after that. And poetry is basically the way we communicate to those things that transcend like the mere practicalities of everyday life, you know, like the chit chats and
Mhm.
like that really try to help us understand that those very important aspects that we don't like to uh,
Mhm.
anymore in our societies, right? And it's part of it is because of, you know, like how we structure, you know, communication in all aspects, you know, like you know, like when you read like even like the letters, like the way people used to communicate like in written form, that was very tied to, it was very emotional. People had like these romantic letters, you know, like nobody does that anymore. Like it's all been reduced to like, you know, like sex chats. That's you know, like that's how much culture has reduced in terms of like our abilities to really express ourselves, you know, like it's evolving rapidly, and I think that's part of that can be associated also to increasing like mental health epidemics, you know,
Mhm.
like because we don't even know how to talk about it really, right? And
Yeah. Yeah, that's I've noticed this. It's like when I read some, if I read like nonfiction, the kind of, subconscious thought is basically like, all right, what's this? What's the bias? Like, where is this? Is this, where is this? I'm digitally assigning a one or a zero to this nonfiction article, and then it's evaluating it through there. And, I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying I notice this when I read things online. It's like, all right, New York Times, all right, boom. I'm assuming it's going to be liberal bias, whatever. It's just going to be they're already starting from this one end, and then they have to prove themselves to cross this barrier. And what, and I even noticed this in conversations. You talk to someone, especially it's about politics or something. It's very like, oh, well, did you know in this war, actually, it's really started 100 years ago because they did this. And well, the other person, well, like 200 years ago, they actually did this transaction. Well, no, 300 years ago, it really started here. And you can't, it just, I am almost not even interested in having these conversations anymore because you can always out fact somebody. It's just, I can always trump you with some trivia that makes your whole fallacy wrong. And yeah, with poetry, I feel like what happens is it has this needle like way of just slicing through all of that right into like very sneaky. It's almost very like, I almost kind of feel sometimes writing poetry that it's like it's always not. It's almost like propaganda. Like it has this way. That's not like the best way to put it, but like in this way of subverting all of these. What I think it does is subverts all of these bias. Like when I read a poem, I almost come in with no expectation. Like I'm just ready to like listen to it. And I think in today's environment, like to come in with no expectations on a piece of anything is like kind of crazy because I'll pick even through Substack I'll just see poems and I'm like I don't know, this person could be writing about nature one day and whatever the other day and it's no expectation and then it's like boom, oh crap, yeah, they just hit me. Whereas like if it's anything else, they're setting up this argument, they're setting up a narrative, and I feel becoming very defensive to whatever my I have this my worldview in my mind, and you are either reassuring my worldview or you're trying to break it down through prose. In which case, I'm like very tense. But poetry, it's like, oh crap, I didn't think about it like that. And it's just, I've noticed this. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting aspect to talk about it because yeah, like it has this interesting way of influencing people because it does that in a it's almost like infiltrating without attacking, right?
Yeah.
You know, like because it's not trying to attack you and like impose certain sort of view, then you let your defenses down and then it can actually convey its message, right? So it has this kind of weird approach to, and that's why I think like art is like the only really relevant form to communicate things anymore, you know, like because there's like it's a really you know, it's like why would you write like certain idea or certain thing like in terms of poetry or a story in terms of just like a nonfiction like writing, you know, and part of it is like this aspect that if you do it right, you know, like the person, you know, leaves its like mental defenses that it's immediately going to judge it in like a box and not pay attention or say I already know this, I don't need to go deeper, you know. And once you let those like mental structures down, then it actually allows you to start processing it, right? And that's where you can actually start communicating things in a way that people can actually be receptive to them, right? Instead of actually just like boxing things, you know, and immediately closing themselves up.
Yeah. I, yeah, I think, you know, poetry's not unique in this. I think, yeah, like you said, it is more generalized. I just, for me lately, it's been, I haven't, like for music, you know, yeah, like, you know, music, I think can do this for sure. Obviously, you can. But it is, it kind of like, I think it's one of those things where even if I hear music right now, you know, if you're like, hey, let's listen to music, it's going to feel like more of entertainment. Like that's already like this bias that's kind of built up where it's like, oh, well, we're going to have music in the background or, you know, no one I think really listens to music anymore. It's relegated to this background task. In that case, it's like trying to make the environment more nice to be in. And Ian, like we were, you know, he talks about it from this transformative kind of thing. But obviously there are, I think of like Pink Floyd or Rush. You know, back when I was younger, like a Rush was like, you know, when I went through my libertarian phase, like this was, you know, these guys were speaking to me from Toronto, kind of thing. So yeah, there certainly can be this aspect, I think, and it's nice when this one of those forms can. I think maybe it's just different for different people. You know, like for someone I think who is can hear it through music, that's awesome. I think that's great. Like that's we're all going to resonate to different things and different people for sure. And I think with poetry in particular, not 8 months ago, if you would have, I don't think I would have ever believed you if you said I was going to be talking to you about this because I would have been one of those persons that would have just completely shrugged it off. So it's also one of those things where you kind of have to be receptive already to it and then, or at least be open to the letting something in. And then once it kind of rattles around inside, you're like, oh, okay, I see what this is doing to me.
Yeah, I think in comparison to other artistic mediums, what is really relevant about poetry is that it does it by subverting normal language, right? So and so it almost forces you to start looking at language in a different way if it does it right, and that's what can make it very powerful, especially when it's especially in people who are very attached to certain ways of thinking through language, right? And so if you have a very analytical, very you know, like just breaking apart things and classifying them this very analytical point of view, poetry can actually subvert that way of thinking and start um, allowing you to use language or think even like in different ways and make connections that otherwise would have seemed impossible. And it can feel almost like magical at times too, because it starts doing things that that, you know, like the language doesn't normally do, or it's, you know, like it has that magical aspect, right? Like when poetry strikes, right, it feels almost magical, right? Something starts happening that you say, like, how did this happen? You know, like I'm used to reading all the time, using language, and suddenly this piece of text starts activating all of these connections and random things. And like something that's really interesting in terms of like poetry itself is like the symbolic aspect, right, which is like very central. And symbolic comes from the Greek symbolon, which means like um like the etymology comes from like almost these clay jars. Bolon, it means almost like ball, is from where ball comes, metabolism, all these forms of throwing balls. And they would break it apart and they would almost use it like as tickets for entrances or stuff like that. So when they put it back together, like there was this aspect of like accessing a whole, right? Like the putting together of the pieces into a different whole. And what's really interesting is like the opposite of symbolic is the diabolic, is like the breaking up, like the separating of the, like of the pieces, like all, if like through the analysis or through, like all this very categories and stuff like that, it's just like spreading into many, like the scientific mind view, right, where things just get like reduced to their atoms, and there you go, you're just a bunch of nothing, right? And so like in that sense, like especially for us westerners, like so deformed by this rationalistic, analytic, like scientific way of viewing things, where you just like break them apart into relevance. Like poetry is so relevant because it's like the opposite force. It's like, how do you take the pieces and from there try to construct a whole that is coherent, that it makes sense, that like I think Marcel Duchamp said that that poetry is the art of connecting the umbrella to the sink, right? So
That's amazing. Yeah.
it has this aspect of
Yeah.
like trying to find how things work together.
Yeah, I think is the reason why I'm really enjoying it right now because yeah, through the military and through basically I'm an engineer by training. That's, my whole entire, probably, for like 30 years have been really focused in this kind of very logical, very and then as like a hacker, basically what you do is you look at a system and you deconstruct it and you say, well, this, how did they, I spend a lot of time trying to reverse engineer how something works and then try to find the unwritten assumptions that had to have been there to make this thing work. And then I take guesses like, well, if they had to do it like this, then there's probably this flaw here. And then you press on the button and then the whole system collapses. And that way of kind of and so what as a result of that kind of being in that world, I also noticed like it's just a very completely negative thing because as a security person everything I see has some flaw and it's so it was all this doubling of like thinking through and these building these systems and seeing these flaws that's just I felt very overwhelming. And then yeah, this complete yeah, connecting the umbrella to the sink. I mean, this is an amazing yeah, it's something that I have been trying to, as as much as one can learn how to do this or more for me it's probably an unlearning of the old, kind of logical systems because I think probably everybody has this childlike let me, I can imagine a baby would want to put an umbrella in a sink and think that's natural. And so you almost have to unlearn this, oh, well, umbrellas don't go in sync to have this kind of childlike, let me smash these things together and see what works, which is kind of goes, I'm just thinking of that, this Zen concept of like approaching things with a beginner's mind, almost like and that's how I feel. Like I really feel like a baby in this world. And it's just like, let me put these, why doesn't the circle fit in the square? Let me try. Maybe if I rotate it, maybe, like there's no, just trying things and exploring. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it's almost, and like poetry does have in so many ways that that aspect of trying to access that aspect of you, like the childish mind, the like the like the Shoshin, which is like the beginner's mind, but it's like this almost like clean slate where it's like like with the rose, like it's like this destroying cliches, like the cliches where you already think you know something, right? Like, and like a true poet doesn't, like it starts by almost kind of letting you make you realize that you don't know what the rose is, like through normal day life we have to kind of, right, like if somebody tells you look at the rose and you can talk about it, like we need that aspect, but like, but it's a matter of balances, and like from I guess my metaphysics, which I ground a lot in like what I do in terms of astrology. It's a lot about finding balances, right? So we have like an emotional aspect, like axis, and like a rational axis to man, and that usually kind of translates to the four elements, right? Like fire, water, air, and earth, right? And what I like about it is that it shows that the problems inherent to mankind is that all of these aspects are kind of in some ways opposed to each other. We have like aspects that are contradictory to ourselves. Like from the rational point of mind, that could be like the analytic, earthy aspect, like that is like very pragmatical, very about like just finding things, defects, and what's wrong with something. How does something break apart? And all these aspects are, of course, very useful. But when you only use that aspect of yourself and it starts like becoming the whole, you ran into problems, right? Because you start then trying to solve your emotions through that aspects, and and you find everything wrong, and this is stupid, and I shouldn't be feeling this, and this is childish, or this is like even like too feminine, or you start like judging yourself according to standards that are not appropriate for that aspect of yourself. And for example, in my case, I also suffered from it. Like I'm a mathematician, like, and I also went like into software development. So I also have like this very strong analytical aspect that like that can be overbearing, because then you start like looking at everything through that lens, like your relationships, you start like finding defects in every partner you have, or like you can not switch it off after a while, and then it takes over. And so then you need to find balance, and part of it, it's like things like art, like and learning to transcend that way of viewing things that just goes back to ones and zeros, and which is absolutely useless in when it comes to so many aspects of life.
Yeah, and I had a friend once who like just was really into the quantified self movement, just like recorded everything they did just to an absolute scream. So like the water you just took a sip of, you would write that down. But at the time, like I wrote this time, I had this one, whatever. He would estimate 10 milliliters of water, and just like, it's like, oh my God, he was, and just that, so yeah, there is trying to find like, what is the point of all you have all this data, then like what is it that you, it's like I felt almost he was trying to discover something about himself through the data, to prove his intuition. So it was like, well, he could just, well, I don't drink enough, or I don't drink enough water, or, it would be like an intuition thing. But then he was like, well, let me calculate how much water, like, so it's just like, well, your intuition already, you felt dehydrated and you should just probably drink more water. Instead, it comes into this. Yeah, he was also a hacker type. So, but yeah, yeah, the balance thing I think is, yeah, this is, yeah. And then on the flip side, I think even you were mentioning it before, all the, if you are completely this artistic type who can't manage their life. I recently watched it was a documentary by Adam Curtis, who talked about like the crash of financial systems and everything. It's just crazy. But he mentioned in there, he had this, Ayn Rand had this marriage. I can't remember the man at the one point, but at one point she tells her husband, look, you have to basically connect me to the outside world. Like I'm focused on doing this. I'm doing all this stuff. You have to like just completely take care of this, like all the material stuff. And she wanted to be kind of in this other realm. And this guy was basically like, I can't do that for you. Like in the interview, he's like, that was too much of a burden to deal with this genius, his wife Ayn Rand, and he ended up having an affair. And but like that she, it's like she didn't want to even think about, I don't know, like whether the sink dishes had to be done. Like she wanted to abstract all of that to this one degree and completely projected that whole other side of her onto her husband, who just like crumbled under that. He's got to like get dressed in the morning too. He couldn't he couldn't do it for two people. So yeah, so that's just an example that. But you were doing this. Yeah, you mentioned the other thing you mentioned. You started doing this podcast on astrology. You had a couple episodes there, and then yeah, but I can't. I think you had like two or three. But have you? I can't remember if you did more because I can't.
No,
Yeah.
I haven't yet. Like I'm still figuring out like rhythms between like going into one place and another. I do want to go further into it because it's like I think it's very relevant. I think for what I do in a lot of ways in terms of like art analysis and how we can understand the purpose of a lot of things like in art and yeah, for example, Ayn Rand is like a perfect, a really good example because most of us really just want to focus on this side of ourselves and ignore the rest. And some people even go as delusional into try to say that the world behaves only under that aspect, right? Like the germ, like it happens so much with philosophers, right? Like they reduce everything to the rational aspect, and they want that to conquer, the whole of reality, right? And most of philosophy is just people arguing, like there's basically just arguing like what seems very silly to us, like the pre-Socratics, like if the world's made out of water, if the world's just made out of air, like that's basically the same discussion, like Ayn Rand saying that it's all about the individual and the individual's desires and the will. And then you'll have like Karl Marx saying it's not, it's about the community, like in a very reduced way of talking about it. But it's basically all of it reduces to just like you trying to make like the part the whole, because they as individuals have focused so much on this aspect of themselves that they see reality only through that, and they then try to make that their myopia, like they, yeah, just like their close-sightedness into like a virtue, right? And this is, like those are the worst aspects, I guess, but everybody I think deals with this, and to how to balance and understand, like different aspects of yourselves, and that also helps you understand other people. Because if you only think like the rational aspect is valid, then you're going to judge people who can be more emotional, more tied to their intuition, or it becomes not only like an internal problem of like fracturing, but it also then expands into like judging other people in society. And that's why I think it's so useful, not only as a personal tool but also as a tool to understand others, like because as silly as it sounds, like most of us rarely transcend like our comfort zone where we think like only this is good, and we have a lot of trouble finding nuance, right? That's what it's become almost impossible today. It's all about tribalism, and this side is right and the left is wrong, etc. All this kind of nonsense.
See, I like on that. I like to see this analog in the digital comparison, because to me that's the polarization is nothing but just the one and zero. So it's this, when you say nuance, from an electrical engineer point of view, this, at some point the analog voltage gets above a level and it's automatically a one and it's automatically zero. But there's a range in there where it actually can float around a little bit before it's detected. And so this is how I kind of think of these kind of polarization things, because this is what gets lost in I think, and the ignoring, like, whether digital versus analog, kind of like, I'm not talking about the, like, whether vinyl sounds better than CDs or anything, but like just this concept of like this to me, this is all very digitization based. It's very, yeah, pushing you, because nothing, digital systems hate analog behavior. They want things to be so crisp. They want the transitions to happen very quickly. Like any kind of digital system that has a floating signal or an analog signal, the first thing is like, let's clean up the signal. Let's make it. And so, I mean, that concept, I really, yeah, really like as far as this kind of like thinking about how basically people interact online or anything is just like snapping you to that one extreme or the other instead of looking at it of like as a holistic kind of thing. Like what I mean, it just from a signal processing, analog signal processing is all about continuous kind of things. Like looking at a sine wave, you dealing with calculus functions that happen over time. So it's like a holistic kind of view, and digital is always discrete. So it's like at this specific time, what was the signal? So it's this is me, going, applying this kind of a more analytical framework onto this. But again, it's I this kind of like at least for me, like this kind of basing in analog stuff and analog electronics and things is kind of trying to find that nuance, like you said, in between the signal. What's being said in the noise? Like what is appreciating the noise from the signal. Like, so the noise is actually part of the signal. And that's where the interesting things are happening. And that's just an electrical engineer trying to rephrase what you said. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it's a good analogy because it has to do almost with yeah, like our frame set and how we try to yeah filter out what we think is wrong and try to almost constantly translate everything into our prejudices in a way, right? Like if it's somebody you really like emotional, they might not even pay attention to what you're actually saying. They might actually just pay attention to your intention, to your inflection, to like how you're saying it, how you're using your body. Like there's all these different channels of information, and different people are gonna fixate on like what they think is important and what it's not. And sadly, most people never even realize this aspect, that they're filtering so much out of their perception because of their inherent bias, right? Like, and in part of what you want to do is try to expand and start recognizing what you thought it was noise, right? Like it's in in actually discovering that it's actually like so equally relevant, just that it's just part of like I guess, the game of life, that we have to develop through this place of different perspectives, right? And that's, why I think it's so important to even just adopt that framework, right? That you have a bias, but that you should be made aware of it, because we all now have like this kind of really amped up digital mindset that this is only noise. I'm not going to pay attention to it. You're from the right, you're from the left, noise. I'm not going to pay attention to it. Like all these different dichotomies, that it's crazy, right? Like with gender, everything has been made into these just like crazy dichotomies that we have lost the capacity for nuance and thus for communication, right? Like that's why it's impossible to almost discuss things with anybody now. I still grew up in a time where you could discuss, like, find interesting and constructive to have a discussion with somebody from the opposite aisle of wherever you are, right? And now it's it's impossible to think that like people don't even think that there's anything worth in while they just want to bludgeon you into submission into their own view. That's what they think is like a discussion is, right?
Yeah, there's a lack of exploration. It's really like a lack of it's yeah, it's yeah, it's that this is like what I was mentioning before with the pros. It's like I can't these discussions I can't even have any because no one's really interested in changing someone's mind. Like that's I think it's just I want you to hear. I mean, the quickest way I've noticed to like kind of move these conversations along is just to be like, yeah, I agree. and then and then watch them keep trying to like convince you, and you're like, look, I agree, so I went to, so I definitely have a kind of like a libertarian leading thing, but like, I went to one of these kind of things once, and it's the only one I went to. It was some meeting, and I went down there, and so I was like, well, I'll go check it out. So there's all these libertarians, and so in this room is all these people who basically already kind of agree. Like we're all calling ourselves libertarians. All right. So it's like, oh, I'll probably have some like interesting discussions. And it's like they're all trying to convince me, like they're trying to convince their wives still. And I'm like, no, I already agree with you. Like we're already on the same page. So like, what's the next thing? Like we got it. Like I'm sold. Whatever. Ayn Rand, I got it. I'm here. We believe. But then what do we like? What does that look like? And there's no discussion of it. It's just like they're just kind of all. It was crazy. It was like they were talking as if they're in an internet chat room, just shouting these like slogans. And yeah, so after that, this was kind of like last. I didn't go to it anymore. But it's just, if you just tell someone you agree, they're completely in shock because everyone's expecting you to just agree with them, and then that they don't know, no one knows, like they're all prepared to have this big thing and just say I agree, and watch them just deflate because they don't know what to do next. It's a funny social hack I do.
Yeah. It's crazy. People are just like looking for fights, right? It's just like this combative mentality of the world, where it's just like it doesn't even make sense that somebody agrees with you. It's like, what do you mean? Like they're not even capable of like processing that. And it has to do with that, no, like we have lost this capacity for harmony, that is, like it's almost like like people are getting atrophied, like in so many different aspects of themselves. And at least we can hope to show that through different means, like especially through art, because as we said, like if we allow them to lower those defenses and access a point of mind where they can like then have a clear view of whether it's themselves or the world in a new way, that can be very powerful and that can be very transformative. And but as people like yeah, I don't know, like as long as people are in these mindsets, like normal discussions as before are not going to work anymore. Like people are too, I no, but I read this in like the New York Times that they blah blah blah, and I saw this, and like there's no way, like there's no way, and almost all discussions
Yeah,
are
exactly.
pointless.
Yeah, that's what I was definitely that person, trying to just collect facts to trump these kind of to, I don't know, basically impress the other person into shutting up. And then this is just, there's like yeah, just there's no win, there's no bottom to that well. You can just keep going down forever, and it's a very, I was a very like sad state that I was in when I was doing these things. And then yeah, to kind of bring it back to like what is but so even on like Substack, I think to a degree, which we're kind of all, I like to say we're all Substack artists, because you can't, there's no difference between a poet, a musician, a visual artist on a Substack. I think it's all the same canvas, right? So we're all just Substack artists. And so some of these things I feel like even that is kind of lost there. Like it just, there is, I don't know. There are days, because I'll read, there'll be days, especially with poetry. It's like you can read something and I'll see it resonate, or, yeah, they'll do the human thing. And just, I also get annoyed at myself for doing it. But you see the likes and you see the comments and you're like, okay, well, a lot of I'll read it and be like, all right, this didn't resonate with me. And then you see something with all these likes and comments, and then you're kind of like, read it again. And it's, some things just don't click at that time. And it's just weird how, but what that platform does is just makes you want to go to the next thing, right? So it's just, I don't know. I just have this such it's just such this kind of, I think about it a lot because there's good aspects there, but it also is reductive to a way, like we were talking about before, that makes it very difficult to, like, on one hand, one side, is it helping? It's channeling everything through a Substack lens, which there are good things on there, but the same kind in that like context that you see them. It's like going to see a great piece of art in a bad installation. It's like really changes how you go to go through the Louvre and then see the Mona Lisa after you've walked all those steps and all this stuff. Like you have this build up to go see it. It's not at the entryway, but on Substack everything's in the entryway. So it's like this weird. I don't know. It's sometimes I just find myself interacting with it in like, I don't know. I have just such a hard mixed feelings with this whole thing there. I don't know if there's a better place really, but it is. These are my feelings when I try to interact with stuff there.
Well, yeah, I think in poetry, I think that's something that is gonna be that's gonna happen in reading no matter what, because like poetry is there's like this phrase I also really like, that it's like 90% of poetry is bad and 10% is good, but like the 10% that's good is gonna vary for everyone, right? So like like it happens for me and from people reading my work. Like I really find it interesting that like every poem like I post, maybe like one different person will find it excellent and the other people will find it okay or irrelevant, right? And but for one people it will really connect. So it's really interesting to see that kind of at work, right? Like that between my poems, like maybe like yeah, like every poem will resonate like with like different 10% each time. And it happens to me like I also go like relatively quickly through poems, not to say that I don't pay attention, but like I also have like this mindset of not really expecting that I'll resonate with everything, or that there's like this necessarily like a notion of like objective, and if a lot of people liked it, it's gonna really be important for me. But then I'll go through one and say like, oh, this is really good. Now I know to commit to a really deeper look, and like, and for some poems that might even like be like, I want to read this, I want to record this, I want to do stuff with that, like like I that it becomes almost automatic. Like I couldn't do that depth of reading with everything, but it's just like a matter of recognizing of trying to find something that will make me stop and stay there, right? Like I want to devote my time to reading this like carefully. I want to work at it, like like do that work, like so. And from that aspect, I just think like it's important for people um, to really, when they find something, actually do stay there, right? Because a lot of people is, oh, it was really good, then I want more like entertainment, like taking it from that mindset. And it's not like, if you find something good, like stay there, like really read it again, like think about it, like write a nice comment or whatever, or try to collaborate, or like put more effort in the things you like. Doesn't mean that like that has to be for everyone. You'll see what resonates with for you at what moment, but just
Mm-hmm.
have both options, like
Mm-hmm.
scroll through everything, but once you find something, really stay there and really commit it.
Yeah. I think this is what I'm trying to do these live stream things on Fridays. And and a lot of it was born out of the like, there are some of these poems I just really want to just read, like by reading them, I feel them more. And so I just thought, so I just tried it out last Friday and I was like, well, just what a, just want to do a casual just read other people's poems, pick five of them and just have this nice, kind of like let other people hear them. Cause I've gotten compliments on my reading before. So it's fun for me. It feels like I'm reading to adult kids, so I've always liked reading to my kids. So maybe there's some of that in there, but yeah, it's just what, I read, there was, this one poem from I read yours, of course, but then there was one other one that I read from an author that's kind of not in our group, and he was like, whoa, all these people like kind of like there's and just this kind of which what a nice thing to just kind of like highlight these these other things that are going on. Like everyone's got all this stuff, scrolling through, and just if you can just slow down and just read some poems without really, try. That's why I try to keep it super casual. I just thought it was like a very nice way to kind of like, kind of give back to the all the stuff that's scrolling by, and then try to like really focus on it. Because I think to a degree we focus a lot on a lot of these like dead great people, obviously they did a lot of cool things, so, but then there's like a kind of a, less of an, it's weird. I would say to a degree, a lot of people, there's a lot, you can make an argument that people focus on the now too much, but then sometimes with art, there's almost like an external focus. Like once David Lynch is dead, now everyone's a David Lynch fan, but like, we have all these living people working right now, doing things on Substack. And I just think it's sometimes really nice just to like highlight those, and without trying to like have, we can talk about Marshall McLuhan, we talk about Dave Foster, all these guys are great. But like, there's people alive right now that we can work with and talk with and do all stuff. And, it's also like, fun to work with people that can actually respond back sometimes.
Yeah, because I think uh, we miss the aspect that a lot of art has been developed in a community fashion, right? Like in Paris, like like with the surrealists, and then with like Ernest Hemingway and all these people that were flowing through there. They like artists, tended to develop in this like intermedia communities, right? And it was like something very enriching, and that was like a great period for art. But now we don't have that anymore, and it's getting and like a and it's such a powerful thing, to just like have this interaction between different artists, and like and see how something might like with Keith, like I saw one of his paintings. I said this is really cool, and it inspired me to making like a fairy tale, right? And having this like a cross pollination, I think is really important and very enriching for all artistic creation, and that's where you can really find value in like people doing things actually now, right? Because there's no you don't have that you cannot have that level of community with dead authors, like they can inspire you, but you're not gonna be able to collaborate with like Ernest Hemingway, or like whatever other artists you like, and so that community aspect I think is really important, something I hope we can continue developing in with like things like you do, which I think is wonderful because it's kind of like a win-win, like yeah, you take the things that you want to take a closer look at, and like really pay attention to, and you also by recording it, like help others do it as well, like through more attention focused media, like reading, like adding all these extra layers of information that make it more, I guess in a way alluring, or capture more the attention, instead of and it has a rhythm. If you read it slowly, you have to go with that rhythm, you can't just like scroll through it, or or if that person is really damaged, they might like like put like twice the speed on the recording, but like I don't think that that would
Yeah.
happen with anybody who's reading poetry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think selfishly, part of this is doing this so that people make these audio spaces, because that's what I want to hear. Like I want to like I want you I would love to have just like a vinyl record of these of poets. Like I have some records behind me of these collections of these poets from like the 60s and stuff, and this was, there's a lot of these kind of recordings, and this seems like, kind of like passe or whatever now, but it would be amazing to like have a record of like a bunch of poets doing things now. I mean, how that would I like that's what I want. I want to put a record on and hear you and hear all these other people just like reading poetry, like as if it was done in the 1960s in a smoky bar with William Burroughs doing this thing. And these are the things that can actually be done in like a digital collaboration. Like we don't have to be in a physical space, but just to have it, that's what I listen to. I like listening to those things. And when people, if the worst thing that comes out of this is people are doing more voiceovers, then I've won, because that's how I want to consume. I want to play and listen to people, because then, yeah, otherwise the second I'm looking with my eyes, I'm skimming. The second it's playing, yeah, I know there's like a 2x button there, but it's just like I can put the phone down and then listen to it. And I think, to go back, yeah, I think one of your, if you don't mind me giving you the compliment here, is that one I think your strengths really is how quick you've been jumping on to do these kind of things, like with Keith and the things that we did, and some other people. And it's really, I think the way you go about it is very nice, because there are some groups that kind of are trying to do this, but in a lot more kind of, I want to say bureaucratic, but there's like, there's like rules, and there's like, well, we have this, and there are, some people are, for, me being a borderline anarchist, I don't necessarily know if I believe in intellectual property laws, but some people take those things seriously, and they have all these things. And so when, there's rules and this kind of things, then it's kind of like, just feels like work. And I think what I've liked when you've done this is you've really just kind of jumped in with that kind of enthusiasm, and just for like, let's do this cool thing. And I think that is such a nice thing, because I feel it's almost, when somebody wants to do a collaboration, there has to be a little, you kind of have to be like, you kind of have to let go a little bit, because like now there's two people in this idea, and not everything, like one of the things that we went back and forth on was like this one particular thing in that mix, it was like, I remember doing it, and you were like, well, this really has to, this at this time it has to get louder. And this is where I just thought we really worked well together there, because I just wanted to make it known that's like the worst part of editing I really just like, very difficult for me. And so I just tried to be, hey, up front, like, if you want to do this, I have no problem, but like, this is where my limitations are. And I think, yeah, you heard me on that, and I think it came out better for it. But you do have to have that kind of like, you know, you a little bit let go and let other kind of mold it. And I think that's difficult. I think for some people that's quite difficult to do. So I just have a, I've seen you do this with a couple people now, and the results have always been great, as a result. So it's been very nice.
Thanks, and yeah, just it has some weird hangups. I think, especially in poetry, because like poetry has been so relegated to, like to the waste bin of like culture, that people are really used to it to being like almost like a really solipsistic endeavor, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I write for myself, and like I do share it because I kind of want to, like instinctively to have like kind of like societal aspect, but like because they lack that I guess like the sense of a performative aspect or a societal aspect that does not exist in culture anymore. They don't. I think a lot of people have forgotten how to add that dimension to their poetry. So for me, it is also very important to like make people remember that it has this very performative
Mm-hmm.
aspect to it, like that it the limits between music, theater, and poetry are not at all clear, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
take it as far as you want, and by reducing yourself to just like the written form, you're doing yourself um, a disservice. And I think even if you want to just make a great book, if you don't understand those aspects of poetry, I think the quality will suffer for it. And in the end, you do need to return to that aspect that all arts have. Like I talked about it with Will. Like the difference between like just writing a song and writing a poem. The song, you're always gonna write it with a certain understanding that it's going to be performed, right? And we don't have the same thing for poetry now, and I think it suffers because of that greatly, because then it just becomes like my little narcissistic experiment about me, right? And that's why people don't want to know about poetry anymore, because I don't want to hear about your narcissistic self-indulgences, just to put it like very coarsely. But like that's why like a lot of like teenage poetry is bad. It's all about my little sadness and gothic experiments, or whatever, like but it doesn't have like, it's all about me and myself, and it doesn't have like that dimension of how does this become relevant to somebody else, how can this transcend just like self-aggrandizement? How can this become something that becomes meaningful in a way for somebody else? And that's magical. That's not necessarily something we take it for granted, but the fact that these experiments we do with like words for ourselves that help us understand our feelings and our place in like the universe and all this stuff, that can then translate into an experience for somebody else. I think that's something really special, right? That we can
Yeah.
transcend the boundaries of the self into something that it can become, or attempt to become like social, universal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, and then especially the, if you were performing, live in front of someone, you have that kind of feedback. Like you have this, I mean, even that, I did that performance that I recorded live like a week ago. And, I've done live video streaming before, but this was like the first time I did, any kind of artistic streaming. But even there, what I had was there was a chat that I could see, and I kept that up on a screen, and I couldn't read it. There was too much going on to read it, but like I could kind of get a sense of what they were doing, and you know, that was, even though there was significant delay. It's about a minute, or it's about 30 seconds delay, but like even that still is like, I still felt as much as a connection you can. Otherwise, I'm here in this room performing for a camera. I mean, it's so abstract, and to have that kind of, yeah, if you are, it's a really, it's not, when it works out, it is magical, like you said. And then, but it's also incredibly correcting. Like, I imagine if someone got up there and tried to do this complete mismatch of confessional style, my dog died kind of stuff, like the fact, if like the audience is not jiving, you get that feedback very quickly. And that can also, I mean, it helps kind of correct. I mean, that's what that was like. Us, you could put it, was the like OG algorithms, right? People would go up and perform, and they would get lettuce thrown at them or whatever. And you either like accepted that, or you learned to cater to what the audience liked.
Yeah, definitely. And as I mentioned, that's why it is so important also to just make better poetry. Even if your like purpose is just to make a good book of poetry, like that, subjecting your poems to like public ridicule or to a crowd will definitely let you know how people are reacting, and yeah, your performance was great. And like I would like really encourage everybody to see what Josh did, because he did like this really cool, almost like TV show, like where everything was really, really well selected. Like from the aesthetic of his studio, which had like this kind of crazy '90s like video editing room style, and of course like excellent readings that makes music and sound effects, and like and also really potent poetry, like really personal and intense. And like it's not just like a matter of just like the basic quality he put into it, but like the basic just uh like raw bone marrow of his stuff, like which is really commendable. And yeah, that is, like all of that helps to really capture and elevate poetry past the limits we have self-imposed into it, right? Like poetry is not just like this, like sitting alone and just like reading into your mind something that it will resonate. It can be something really powerful that arrests your attention completely, like when I've heard like people who know how to perform a poem, it really captures your attention in a way that few other things can, just like really like immersive as, like sometimes that not even like the Marvel CGI can now, right? Because we we are so used to that forms of entertainment that now we can, like, if we really develop and really understand the possibilities, there's something really special to be done through the medium.
Yeah, that was a super fun. I had so like to give some context, there was like 6 acts, 5 of them were bands, and then I was the only poetry thing. So I thought that I really had my work cut out for me because like although I do kind of know some of the people that were there, so some of them had known me, but not everyone. But like it's basically was advertised as a concert. So it's like all right, well then, so I knew from the second that thing started that I just had to break all of what people thought. Because if I went up there and I even just was sitting like this, and then it would just people would are again, or they're coming in with their biases of what they think poetry is, and then it's just gonna be like, okay, well, he's trying. Yeah, it's like but like, so I knew like from the first second that they saw it just had to be, all right, this, I don't know what's going to go on. And I really tried to, yeah, there was a lot of like, I was trying to bring like both the Marshall McLuhan aspect to it. So I tried to like, all right, so basically I just thought like, how do I, you know, cool this down? Like I try to take this video and I just need to make it completely cool down. So like the graphics were not complete. It was, yeah, all like you said, this 90s, made it lo-fi as much as I could. So it wasn't this crystal clear. I mean, I actually have a very nice camera and I had to like degrade it. Is like what I was trying to do. So that was that aspect to it. Then the other aspect that I was really thinking about was like almost like an infinite jest kind of style of like how, and how to make this entertaining in a way where it is both entertaining but also like, man, how do I, like, it's almost too entertaining. Like there's almost that double-edged sword of like, now I'm trying to make content that's more entertaining than normal content, but in doing so prove that like all this thing is just this, too entertaining. So that kind of stuff, what I was really thinking about it. And there were so many things where I was like, I don't know if I remember I was like preparing for it and doing this, and then I wasn't like, there was definitely a time where I was like, I don't know if this is any good. So I showed it to my wife, and she was like, she just watched it for like 10 minutes, and I was like, okay, there might be something here. So, but yeah, I think I benefit from not having, like, I looked up, like, I've never been to a slam poetry thing, at all. So I like Googled it once and I watched it and I was like, this, I don't know what this is, but this is not what I want to do. So I think I benefit from not having seen any of that. And then I could just kind of made this what I thought, this is what again, I'm selfishly making things that I would love to watch. Like if someone else out crazies me with like even crazier things, I will have won because now I'm watching things that I think people can do. So yeah, but that was super fun to do.
Yeah, and I think that's the best approach, like we have these opportunity to reinvent poetry, right? We don't, like, it's better if you don't even know what's going on, just like I think I want to try this, and see if it works, and just really start organically finding things that are really impactful and are not just like these awful trends like slam poetry, right? That it just continues to degrade, like the public opinion of poetry. And yeah, I think it was really a really great experiment. Like you already had like the audio part nailed down, and now you added this like visual element, and I thought it was also really well done, and in general just a fantastic show.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. The That's another, the video aspect. I also don't like editing. So like I the live I will sit there and do something live. I would rather get up and do something live than to try to do all that in post. So even though I'm, it's much more stressful, I'm switching. I had to practice a whole bunch of times, but if I'd rather do all of that than to sit in some like Adobe whatever, than try to make those effects. So I really, so that aspect I did cater to, like, a works well for my personality. And then the other aspect really, which I think about a lot, is that there's so many. I mean, not to pick on Ian, because I do actually really like the guy, but like when he puts his thing on YouTube, then he'll go, live on YouTube, and he does a lot of video essays on YouTube. It's really just him talking. It's a floating head talking. And what every time I watch one of those things, it's I notice myself. I'm like, he's really just, there's like no visual element here, and it's not really just him. This is a very trendy kind of thing. Is just to have somebody, or this is why I asked if we're going to do this in video, because like what will happen is I will just get there and watch my phone. Like I'm watching a talking head talk, and I'm interested in what he's saying, but like, why do I have to why am I glued to my phone watching this? There's no extra information coming from the visual aspect. And it's even worse on YouTube, because unless you have YouTube Premium, you kind of can't background it. It makes it like the front ground thing. And so, I really, those kind of video podcasts just really drive me nuts, because on one hand, I find myself almost engaging too much. Like I feel the like turn my brain off aspect of just watching somebody bob up and down, when it's like, I don't need to watch them do this. But I'm also realizing that it's like affecting me. So it's like, so I really tried to, I mean, the other bands were great too, but I really tried to, like, if you're going to watch this, like, we'll just make it to be like basically the things where I really like doing is like, if you watch or listen to something and it's like, what did I just watch? Or what did I just listen? I love that. Like, I will just grab these random cassettes that will just have like, sometimes people shouting, there's crazy things. And I'm like, what did I just listen to? And that's, if I've, this is the aesthetic I was trying to go. But yeah, really focusing on that visual, because it's like, why else would I watch this, is something I try to like think about.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. At least for me, when I, like, now that I'm trying to add video, it's through, I always try to do it in a sense that it's like, there's gonna be like an aspect like of physicality, that I want to really import, not just like me like uh, sticking to the microphone and just talking, but like a really a more conversational, more physical, gestural layer that matters, or that at least will add extra connection to what I'm saying, and hopefully will like complement the not what I'm saying also, right? So it doesn't like just you know it's not just adding video because you want it to be on YouTube or whatever, like it should have like a purpose, right? It should be like it should be like cooperating with the whole thing you're trying to convey, or adapting to that language, to that new language, not just like as a carry on, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's one way to do it. I can see it. I think it, well, I would say, and this, if you don't mind me getting too personal, what for American ears, what the video does for you especially is because of the slight accent. I think it does actually help. So the bringing it in, kind of like really, yeah, but not to, yeah, not to embarrass you, but it actually, in that sense, you are right. It really is, But I think we, embrace these things, because for that, for hearing it and then seeing it, it really is gluing together. And whereas, like, again, not to pick on Ian, it's like I really don't need to see him. Like I everything there is, for an American listener, I can get without seeing it. And then yeah, he is expressive and all that things, but like I really don't. And like, again, not to pick on him, there's plenty of other American podcasts where they're even worse than Ian. Like, at least Ian, you can tell he's getting fired up. He's his body language is animated. There's plenty of podcasters to just sit completely still without moving, and it's like, why are you putting this on YouTube? And it's because just YouTube is drawing in an audience to a degree, I think it's almost kind of, again, it goes back to like, is this hurting or helping? Because like, if you think of it as a funnel, well, okay, I'm drawing them in through YouTube or this video, which video definitely is more of a light for Moss. Like it is absolutely, I will absolutely agree that a video, anything is going to draw more people in. But then it's like, well, how, what percentage of those are engaging it past a video's page? Because I do think video does have this numbing effect where it is just, you can, if you watch it, it's just you watch it, we're just this that TV effect of like, oh, I'm just sucked into watching it. And it can make bad content like consumable, I guess is what I'm trying. Like in audio, if you're listening to it and it's bad, you're going to shut it off. But a video, if it's like if it's like really not what you should be watching, or if it's just kind of bad, there's this tendency just to keep it on. And so that I think is what I'm like sensitive to, where it's like, I shouldn't really be I should just move on. And but if it's on video, you tend to just passively engage with it. So that that's yeah, I don't I'm just that's all I notice with myself is, I will watch videos longer when it's like I really gain nothing out of the last 5 minutes. Whereas with audio, there's more of like, okay, isn't doing for me something, I'm gonna turn it off. Which can be exploited by the content creator, which, so I'm not, there is a thing there because, if I, like I said, if I know, if I do that, I did that video, and if I do these lives, I know more people will watch. It's kind of like, it's almost this like, it's like, yeah, it's this, if I, by doing these live poetry readings, people will turn in because they like the live aspect, they like the video aspect, but then I'm almost like using this weapon against them that I know. So I feel, somewhat conflicted about this.
Yeah, it's another thing that I think could be reduced to balance, because it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like you can definitely make a video based on like engagement tricks alone and really don't have much to say, and but also even if like, but it's also something you have to kind of be aware of, I guess, because even if you have great ideas, if you like, this is something that I struggle, and that's why I started like developing more, I guess, like extrovert abilities, because even if I had like really good ideas, if like I just delivered them like these really monotone voice, and I'm not really like trying to engage nobody, and like it's gonna be really hard to listen, like it's gonna be like the opposite effect, like it's gonna be really hard to convey the message, and or even maybe like get people to be interested in. So it has to be like this kind of mix where you have something to say, and then you also convey it in a way that makes people interested, like like in your video, like of course there's this like maybe self-conscious aspect of trying to make it entertainment, where like you're trying to do something maybe even critical of it, but it's just this matter of understanding it in terms of balance. It's not like, as I like try to say all the time, because like the problem is just when you turn like entertainment all the way up, and and you feel it's just like this trick, like that you can just trick people into views, into money, into attention, and you just exploit that, and that's where it becomes problematic. But inherently, if it's for something that is of value, right, like it shouldn't have to be like an inherent evil, I guess.
Yeah, it it is like yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I came off a little strong. It is like but I don't know, because then there are times like it does feel a bit like alcoholism. It's like I know this content is addictive. I mean, to put it that way, right? Like we're all people right now. People are watching, and they could be spending time with their kids or whatever, and they're listening to us, right? So it's like there is this addictive element to it, and it so you can do it with the intention. I think it can be done. We're talking about this and exploring these topics in the hope that some people are going to think about them, consider them, and reflect on whether that. So there is, we're not trying to sell VPN. We're not trying to sell VPN codes here, but it also there, by the fact that this is going to be on Substack and whatever, there is this almost addictive thing, and so it is kind of like this weird stuff where it's like we are kind of participating in this attention, you know, tech bro kind of economy. We're kind of benefiting from it by highlighting. So it's like I just kind of feel that tension, I think, and that's why I guess why do I feel this way? It's because I think been trying to bring things like offline and kind of bringing this kind of like underground stuff. It is kind of like there's always like that band that once become popular, they're not punk anymore, right? So it's like I feel just very, by calling the thing I did bit punk, it was almost like a reminder to me, like, look, you started this with this goal of trying to do DIY this and this, and so sometimes things kind of pop up where it's like, for example, I don't have that podcast over on Substack, and I don't think I'll ever put it on Substack because like once you put it, there are some. Once I put it on Substack, then the things that are making that thing special kind of it loses a little bit of that to reach the Substack audience. I guess so. These are things that I kind of like it's like by dipping toes more and more into Substack kind of things, it does feel a little bit like, and I think it's one of the better platforms, but like there is this little bit of, negotiating with the devil that you have to do by doing these. And so I'm always aware of that tension, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I also do feel that, and yeah, it's something that I think people should be aware of. Like in order to better use the medium, but also like just like for their like their own just health, right? It's just good to have this always in mind, and because yeah, Substack is also trying to form engagement. It's also like pop-ups, entertainment, like bling bling, like it, and yeah, just even like hear it in this other window, that it still helps, to engage with it in a different way than if it's in just like the Substack app and you're like receiving extra notifications and that are constantly wanting you to click to something else, right? And yeah, it's just about hopefully trying to make content that will prevent that it will be useful and I guess honest enough that people won't go into those loops that normal content tries to generate, right? Because at a basic level, most of the content, even if it's good, is trying to use almost these techniques, that put you in that mindset of entertainment. And what I like about podcast is that you can use it without a screen. You can just like sit down, look at the sky. I like to listen to podcasts before especially before sunrise, so I don't start messing up my eyes like when there's no real light outside. So I'll just like listen to something, wait for the sunrise, and I think it's like a very it feels like a very healthy way to experience and learn and things. I really do like podcasts because of that lack of screen. And when we do use it, I think it should be in a way that is also very conscious of what you're trying to do, so that you're not fitting into this entertainment loop that we all are trying to struggle out of.
Yeah. And to bring it back to the what we started talking about with the McLuhan references, he identified that the auditory space and was a function of us becoming more connected in an electronic world. We're shifting from reading, essentially everything in the Western world, like even you were mentioning before, is very narrative, very sight oriented, reading, logic. These are all like sight kind of things, as McLuhan put it. And then in a global village, it's auditory space. We're back to hearing what things are and hearing what's the gossip and this kind of yeah. And I think podcasts definitely. That's why I'm also such a huge fan of that medium, is just because you yeah it does let it does let the mind go, and you can have it kind of it's just like you can have it in the background while you're doing something else, but then it feels like you're eavesdropping on a conversation. There's always one ear kind of to the ground, so it's like it's never, whereas like music is can be completely in the background, but if you're listening to two people talk, it's almost like you're secretly spying on them, from sort of thing. So you're kind of, there's still part of your brain that's still engaged in a way where it's like, I feel with I, for example, cannot put on a podcast that's people talking and really have it be background, because part of me is there's some subconscious thing that is trying to follow the conversation. Whereas music, I can do that. I can put on music and I will not even know what is just playing and it's setting a mood. But when people are talking, there is something that, at least for me, that it is always following that conversation, and but it's still allowing me to do something else. Like I'm still otherwise doing something. So it is, yeah, it is. I think McLuhan really did identify this kind of audio aspect, and yeah, it is a nice. Hopefully, people are enjoying us converse right now while they're doing the dishes.
Yeah, it's just interesting how of course we're talking about like different like technological mediums, even like artistic mediums, but just like the human body imposes almost also like this sensorial mediums that we have, and it's really interesting to consider how each of them like might help us relate different to the world, right? Like how does the experience of the eyes of the world differ from the ones we get from the ears, than the ones we get from like touch? All of these things are really interesting to consider. What are the I guess the possibilities of each, right? Like through the eyes we can get so much at once, right? Like it's we can really process a lot of information, and that it's not as easy to do like through auditory mediums. Like if you want to just, if you wanted to, I guess, make like transfer like a computer program, like to auditory means, just like to go through a menu. Maybe when you call the bank and it has all these options or whatever, like it's so much slower in comparison to what you can do like just through eyesight alone.
Yeah, I had thought about, if there was a social, I think I did post on this once, or no, or whatever it's called, that if there was a social media where only people could respond by giving audio messages, like that would be an interesting, so like so you just have these like a basically like a voicemail, and then someone commented that this is just a blind person's version of TikTok, which I could, which is okay, I guess that thing. But yeah, that would be. I mean, that's the one thing that hasn't been tried, is that I think we have. This is why TikTok is so popular. Is again, it's the video that is making it engage. This is Instagram Shorts and YouTube Shorts. It's these 30-second videos. But like, yeah, I would imagine if there was an app that was just 30-second audio, and you just scrolled through, there's no whatever, there's the some interface to thing, but there's no video, there's no visual element you can change. It's just all looks like plain whatever, and the only thing is different that is just 30-second audios. And so what, like, you would that would be a fascinating, I mean, it's not going to work as well because it's audio, but it would just be a fascinating experiment. I don't know, this would be, if I was doing some sort of interactive art exhibit thing. This, I would make a social. This would be my thing. I would just do, here's the social media app where it's just audio only, and just see how that would affect people. That'd be so fun.
Yeah, I think I've also kind of fantasized with like a similar, I guess, app ideas. I think maybe it was something that I also kind of started, I guess, uh, thinking about after watching the movie Hair. Like the AI girlfriend kind of movie. which is just like this voice recognition, like it's basically all audio interface. And so I thought that was really cool. You know, that's probably, as that develops, it might be able to make possible those kind of things, you know, like and it would be really interesting if it became like useful enough to like really drift us away from screens, right? Like overall I think it would be yeah, a lot healthier, and for that reason maybe not as economically viable, which is like the
Yeah.
sad aspect of our economies.
Yeah, it's so funny because these voice assistants really have very become very frustrating. And they tried to like the I think people think about the Star Trek kind of style, computer. What's the whatever? And people just really hate the I think generally hate the ones that are existing now. But an audio interface that is always I always think about is that in the like horrible movie, I think it was Alien Covenant. It was one of those horrible alien ones where they go find these engineers or whatever. But the engineer, when he goes into the spaceship, he like turns on the console by playing a flute. And so he picks up a flute, like it's a super high tech alien spaceship. What he does, he picks up a flute and he goes, and then things start coming to life. And I was just like, oh man, that would be what an amazing like interface. Like you play different notes, and things are like so. That example is always that was the saving grace of that horrible movie, and it was just that is an interesting like whether you sing it or whether you think, but like that would be an interesting like. Well, I thought that was a very creative use of an audio interface besides just barking commands at something. You played music for this spaceship, and then it woke up.
Yeah, I think that I think it would be like a really cool direction for tech to grow in. You know, like help us, you know, like explore more of that space, as we are, you know, like so still so embedded into the graphical elements of our life, you know, and that just this development of any other sense like really becomes I think very healthy.
Yeah, it's the like leader in this was Douglas Engelbart, which is one of the foundation guys of Silicon Valley, in like the 60s or whatever. And some of his, a lot of the like early experiments he was doing with what's like formerly known as human computer interface was really kind of crazy. Like, when people were trying to figure out like how to interact with these things. This is all coming out of like Xerox labs and stuff like this. And so, yeah, a lot of this stuff has been unfortunately not as yeah, I have this like love hate with this with computing because it's like I think, I got into it heavily in the 90s with the hacker scene, and I had all this potential, and then it just became like the next generation iPhone. And so it's been very frustrating for me to kind of see these, especially where it started from the 60s and these ideas of like, really, really grand ideas of where things were going to go. And then just to see it kind of reduced to, you TikTok apps. And yeah, has been really disappointing for me as someone who grew up with like that Commodore 64 that's in the background was the thing I absolutely loved, and uh, was got me into computers. And then now it's like we've strayed so far from this idea, and it's kind of been just kind of co-op again. It's like the band that was underground. The computing scene was underground, and then it became mainstream, and now I feel like it sucks. So it could just be me wanting to do the underground thing, but
Well, yeah, I guess it's I think a lot of people feel like that, especially I guess from our generations who like saw it develop, right? Like and maybe had like a you know like still remember when the internet could have developed along more uh, interesting ways. And it is really fascinating how hard it is to impose maybe like healthy versions of technology, is really interesting. Like it feels almost like this force of nature that is almost, like that it's just we can only just direct so much, like my last experience was a lot with these guys, like with Orbit and like the similar projects that
Mhm.
are trying to recreate the internet on a peer-to-peer basis,
Mhm.
and it's just really frustrating to see how this process, like of a really great idea, but it's still so hard to really rein it in and make it work, like even from internal conflicts, all sort of pressures make it just like almost inherently a pipe dream. I don't know. It's really
Yeah.
interesting to see.
Yeah. I think, I mean, if you think about what, I remember being, I don't know, 10 or 11, again, going on this Commodore, and what you had to load in a 5.5 floppy. I had to type in some archaic commands, load star command. There's like a lot that I had to do just to get this. Then you had to wait. And there was also cassette programs that had to read from cassette. There was like a lot that you had to kind of do just to play a video game or something. And yeah, it's this thing where now it's become mainstream. And I distinctly remember when I went to college and I majored in computer science that, I'm also the oldest of seven in my family, that all of my brothers and sisters, when they grow up, they're going to know computers way better than I did because I grew up with these things. They're going to be like wizards. And it was a complete opposite. Like they know less about computers. And I think, now there's less of understanding of how these things really work. And it's to make something, it's this paradigm of like, to make something popular, everything has to be abstracted to be easy of use. But when the things that I like are the things that are hard to use, and that's the fun of using it. And it's like this, it's everybody wants to chase, and like we were talking about with art too, it's like the more popular you become, the more it has to reach this broad audience, and then therefore the less nuance it is, the more watered down it is, the more it appeals. This is why, like, people kind of, I mean, Taylor Swift, my daughters love Taylor Swift, and it's great that they're into music, but like, her music for me is just like, doesn't really do it. But her earlier stuff, like, she definitely had this country vibe. Like, I actually kind of like her early stuff. And then it kind of just kind of became more of a mass appeal thing. And that's, I don't know. I mean, this is like, this to me and this is like, also again, what we're talking about before is like, what's the intention of doing this? Because if the intention is to become whatever, wealthy or popular or famous, then you go through a watering down process. And is that what you want? Because, like, I don't, like, I mean, that's fine if that's what your goal. And there is definitely trajectories that will take you there. But like, no underground person is going, no edgy whatever is going to be mass appeal. That's the completely contradictory.
Yeah, yeah. Just these things about like about art that I think we need to become conscious of, like at a more serious level, to like not just like assume that that's the only way it can be, and just grow as much as you can, and become sell out as much as that, as much as that demands you to do, like it's I think we can, uh, yeah, start rethinking these aspects, especially with, like crazy AI art that might be coming soon, like why try to compete with that, like if it,
Yeah.
like even if it does become that, like there's still so much that can be done, and it's only because we narrow ourselves to these very confined views of what it should be that we are
Yeah.
so many people despair.
The AI thing is so fascinating to me because I, so yeah, I definitely like, I see AI really as, to me, again, from my computer background, AI is like no different to me than a program that is, it's, to me, it's the next evolution of what computers can do. And so the thing, what is and I've tried like Suno, for example, these kind of AI music generators, and they are freaking good. I mean, if you want a song about, make me a song about two people talking about art on a podcast set into a country music style with whatever, it will make a banger that only you and I will love. And it's going to be this earworm, and it's going to have a chorus, and it is crazy. It will do this. And but the thing AI is not going to be able to do is to be able to interact with it. You cannot go you can't go to that song, that person who wrote the song, and be like, what were you feeling when you wrote that song? Like, it may spit out some words and do this, but you're not going to have a human connection with this. And that's I definitely don't I have I mean, AI, first of all, it's here and it's out. There's no putting that cat back in the bag. But I have like no fear about this thing, because like it that to me, like, the purpose of any of this is to make these human connections. And so like AI, it it is quite good at doing lots of things, like even OpenAI and stuff, and there's other models and stuff, but like it is not going to, it really, like the movie Her, like you said, like it's really not a replacement for a human connection. Like it can simulate it, it can emulate it, it can, what it is to me is, what I think about it, it is, and it's because I did some graduate, so I'm going to get a little nerdy here, but I studied AI in graduate school like 12 years ago, and there was a big debate back then of whether AI models should go the neural route, that the language, the way the current models are going, or if they should go a route where you actually kind of know what happened. And so, I wish I can't remember. It was, but basically, the way all these models work now, you have no idea how it came up with the answer. Whereas the other way would be, you actually could figure out how it came up with the answer. And so it's funny to me that the one that won out was the one where you have no idea how it worked, because that is like asking to me, that's like asking a village oracle, do you think I should get married? And the oracle goes, yes, you should marry that person. And you go, well, why? And you're like, because I said so. Like, it completely, so I just find it completely fascinating that it's now, we've come back full circle to this village approach where we're asking AI. It can't tell us why it told something, but it will just say, do this. And you're like, okay. And we've outsourced this understanding. I find it completely fascinating.
Yeah, I also find that connection really interesting. Like the oracular aspect of AI is really interesting, and I think it's so. I think the worst part of AI is that people think like people are afraid of the dumbest things. Like I think that it'll become like this like demiurge that'll control everything, and like just the most ridiculous things. And when they're losing track of the most obvious things that can go wrong, which is how it affects human relationships, and just like, as always, like people using it to gain more control, I guess. That's the obvious, and yet people are worried about the most dumb stuff. And I really dislike how a lot of people have reacted in terms of like art, like, because people gets I don't know, I see people getting so upset about it. And at the same time, these are people, like, that don't support real artists, right? Like, it's just like people in comments that saying like, oh, this is trash, like, absolutely, doing this little comment section crusades that are absolutely relevant, like, it serves no purpose except to, like, vent their frustration, when the real things that they could do to still like promote good art, just like, go pay, like, people for art, like. And that's, like, there was this guy who posted on one of my poems, like, please tell me this is not AI art. And it's like, dude, like, why don't you pay me and then I'll solve your little captcha test, right? It's just like,
Yeah. I mean,
and
that,
it just really angers me that this is like
uh,
the sort of like mentality that people get, like
mhm.
uh from from these like ridiculous panics, I guess.
Hmm. That is a pretty good way. That is a pretty funny way to. I mean, we have the I can't remember the meme, but it's like, how do you know if someone's a human? Is whether they solve that stupid captcha. Is like funny, but yeah, like for if I think of like electronic music, the synthesizer I have. I mean, it has a bunch of like samples in it, and I can play those, and then I can like change the follower envelope and it changes slightly, but like, ultimately I didn't, and then even if I play, my trumpet, like I didn't make the trumpet, like I bought a trumpet, I didn't like forge the brass, so I don't, to me, like, yeah, I don't particularly see AI. I mean, I use a thesaurus, there's definitely tools that are there. And I think everything that we've been talking about today has been really about balance. And so I don't like see this need to like completely shut it off, but it is I also think that it's every technology, and it's funny to see the people who are so against it, but like every technology in like 10 years is can be completely be adopted. People said this about the cars, and they said, it's just like it is go there is go humans just love new things, and in 10 years when the next generation grows up with AI, they're going to be like, whatever, dad, the AI works. Like it's just going to completely move on. So in some sense I'm a little bit fatal. I mean, but yeah, but again, it's like if you're using it, and I think it can be. I think it can also create new kinds of art. Like I think there can be AI generated things that will be clearly AI, and largely I think like the AI images kind of like suck now, but like it's going to get better. AI video is going to get better, and there's going to be. I mean, if you can make a video in like 5 seconds and make something with like a plot line like that, those kind of tools that just don't exist, like it takes to make a video right now, there is a huge amount of burden, and then I think it will unlock a lot of people who can want to explore video formats, and if they have AI tools to do it, they're going to be like, holy crap, this is a lot easier, just like digital was a lot easier than analog. I mean, it's going to be, I think we'll see new art that has AI elements in it, and it's just going to be a new thing. And it's not going to. I don't see it as a replacement. It's no more of a replacement than digital music was a replacement for analog music. I just see it it's just funny to me, the hand wringing, like you said. It's the like I don't know. I don't particularly use. I mean, I use it like I personally like using it for idea generation. I think that's the best element. It's like let me think about this idea, or I'm giving this talk, and it's like a really really good intern. It will like go collect these things, and but yeah, I mean, it's things are still at this point very clear when things are AI generated, but I do think it's going to get better, and the distinction is going to be very very difficult between AI content and you. And I think you just got to embrace. It's going to make what it's going to do is I think it's going to make the human aspects more important, like you were saying. Like it's going to be going to those live theater performances where you can see the human, that person memorized that stuff. Those elements are going to become now more appreciative, because otherwise, if it's a screen, and this is also why I hate the Substack. It's like, what's the difference between a digital thing on my phone if it's AI or human? I cannot tell because it's all coming through a phone. Like those live events, like you said, I think those are gonna be amplified.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because yeah, very soon, like you, it would be, I don't know, it will be really worthless trying to demonstrate that what you're doing on a screen is not AI. There's no point. Very soon, it's just gonna be a matter of trust, and also of like that aspect of curation. Like the most important aspect of art is the recognition of value. That's what AI can't do. It can't by itself. It can't really know what's good and what's not. That's the aspect that humans can bring to it. And like, just like from a mathematical viewpoint, like just like a really random machine that's just writing, like sequences of letters will eventually write like great novels. It'll level will probably write things that you would write or have written by itself, you know. And the difference is like, in order for that to stand out from beyond something that is mere noise, you need like a human being to recognize it as such. And that act is the most crucial and human aspect that cannot be replaced. It really doesn't matter how you get something done, as long as you kind of vouchsafe for it as a human, right? That's the tricky aspect and like the dangerous aspect for everyone, not just like artists. If it's like a software developer who is not able to check and guarantee that the code like the machine gave him is correct, then like you're getting yourself only into trouble, right? Like if you don't
Mhm.
have that capacity to do a value analysis of what AI is giving you, then like you might as well be doing something else.
Yeah, right. It's that, yeah, it's the knowing. That's why I do think of it like this intern, because it's like you send the intern off, they go do this thing, and they think they've done it. And it's like they could even have the right answer for the wrong reasons. And yeah, it does require that, you know, from an engineering point of view, this domain knowledge to know, like, look, this isn't going to work or whatever, or it works in that particular case. Yes, you are correct. Under these very strict assumptions, the thing you told me is correct. But like the second any of those assumptions change, this whole thing falls apart. And if you don't understand, that like, well, the building stands fine without wind, and then when it's windy, it falls down. Like this is where, I think AI is coming up short. But it's, this is like another thing that I think I see a lot in music is that you go to live performances and they have backing tracks, and the singer is up there and he or she has a thing in her ear where like they can hear themselves, and then the speakers that are coming out are playing recorded instruments. And so it's like, people have been accepting, if the critique against AI is that it's fake, then people have been happy to pay lots and lots of money for quote unquote fake music that's not performed live, because they are incorporating recorded elements into this performance. And so, I think you mentioned the word trust, and I do think that's part of it. It's like just being upfront about, hey, this is what this is, or and this is where this again was why I'm really not worried about it, because it completely crumbles. If you get up, if you're someone who's built your whole career on AI art or whatever, and you're able to shield it because you never did a live interview or you never talked to anybody, the second you get up there and try to engage with another human, it's be pretty hard. I mean, there's charlatans that can do it, but for most people, they can see through it really quickly. And so then it's like, oh, well, okay, you just, okay, well, like, so I don't know. Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm not. Plus, it's also, we got to admit, it's like super entertaining. I mean, you can make really, it makes some really hilarious pictures of like things that, you know, if you apply a 8-year-old boy mentality to like, let me draw some funny AI pictures, is actually quite entertaining.
Yeah, yeah, I actually have that essay where I compare AI also to kind of like this childish mind, like which might not even be aware of what it's doing, and you as an adult can perceive it as interesting or like valuable, but there's this process that is not going to be achieved by any AI that maturing, I guess, of awareness of that is able to recognize that away from, like that is capable of recognizing it as such. So yeah, like I'm not really worried at all. I think from a I guess viewer or consumer perspective, like we are kind of past the point where it makes sense to talk about like what kind of tools you're using to get to a certain point. It's more important. I'm more interested in like that point is well curated, I guess, like and that's what's gonna be relevant, at least in terms of like our electronic communications. But it's also gonna make ever more profound experiences every live aspect that is capable of transmitting like that direct connection, that you're aware that is unmediated. And of course it can, like in your example of live performances, it can also be like this, have these technological aspects, depending on how you want to approach it. Like it can also be pretty like assisted, I guess. But even if we have all these aspects, like just from a personal perspective, it's still worth making art, like even if AI takes over, and it still feels like a win-win situation. Like as consumers, we still get like even like at the best point, like transformative art or whatever, like I really, at that level, I don't really care if it comes from somebody dead 100 years ago or from some machine that, like I still think it'll require the human aspect to really know what is actually the masterpiece and not, that involves this almost like imaginative, like creative, like very humane aspect to recognize it. I don't think like they'll just like switch a machine and let it go for a weekend, then it'll say this is the best novel ever. I don't think it works like that. But like but even if we have all those things, it'll still be relevant for humans to make what would be in comparison shitty art, because it's something like it's
Mhm.
inherently worth for us to develop as humans.
Yeah, and right. This is the like the aspect of yeah, I mean, I like thinking about it in that way. If like, okay, let's assume that it will just transcend, it'll just be able to crank out like the best art ever. Then we still have the thing that like, well, we're alive now, and we're alive with the people who are alive now, and these are the people who we're interacting with. And so yeah, I mean, it could change. In AI may go this complete like avant-garde kind of like path because it also ends up getting on these feedback cycles, right? So it could just go down this completely like path of making this like crazy whatever high art, and then humans will be throwing the bananas at the wall, and the AI will be like, well, that will, that's not. The AI could reject it, and then humans will. It'll be like this complete like punk kind of style of like, we're making art that the AI hates, and then so like what a crazy. I mean, just yeah, it's so yeah. So this is I think this is why this is to me again. I keep thinking about this idea of like what is the point of like what at least to make it kind of like selfish, like why am I doing this, like what is the point of all this, why am I trying to do all this poetry, like what is this. And I think it's really about like having these kind of moments here where you and I can discuss it and have these time to do this, and it's like just trying to remember that this is the point, like we all want to dream about like whatever, well, one day we'll be on this record or we'll have this book, but it's like you know in those, like I think back then everyone wanted to be on like a Charlie Rose or whatever. There's something where like if I was only on this show I've made it. If I'm interviewed by this person I will have made it. And it's like, yeah, but all along the way there's all these people who you can have these connections with that have this kind of more of an attachment. They resonate with you more than any famous interviewer, whatever. And it's like, why not? Like you've made it when you've had those, like that's it. Like appreciate those steps along the way. So this is, yeah. Unfortunately, I just don't think these computers, as much as I love them, I honestly think they're going to be jealous of us. It's going to be like the angels. They're going to be like the angels wishing to be like humans. Like they have the immortality, but it's the mortalness that makes the human special. This guy, I kind of think of these AIs like angels in that sense.
Yeah. Also, yeah, very interesting comparison. I think it was uh let me see if I remember the name. That this kind of cultist guy who said that like one of the ways to invoke kind of like angels or even demons would be like through these kind of like AI kind of chips things, like so yeah, it's just interesting how tech, even though it feels, or at least it's been told like this story about like going past the these spiritual dimensions of man and like superstition and all these kind of things. When you start like really paying attention, it never did. Like I think part of, like, even from McLuhan's point of view as a Catholic, he saw it that way, like it has a spiritual component to it, and it's a lot less. I don't think, like as I mentioned, like it's not like our ancestors and like people in previous times didn't want science because they were dumb. A lot of the times they were just more conscious about the consequences of adopting that kind of route, and in that sense, like our lives are really not that different, like at the base level of what it means to be human, like no matter what kind of technology I think comes, it always has, it can always be understood from a very humane challenge, I think.
So this is like the killing the scientists in that period, but it's I think you're suggesting that it's like a because I've always thought about it, you know, I haven't reconsidered this problem in a while, so I've always thought about it. It's like, well, they're just rejecting the truth, and so obviously the truth is winning. But I think you're kind of suggesting that what the reason we killed these scientists is actually not so much that it was true or not true, but that it could upend this connection, in that case to a spirit, to Christianity in some cases, that would just shake this connection of humans to the spiritual nature. That if the earth, if the sun didn't revolve around the earth, if that truth was proven untrue, then it would shake so many people that they would just stop believing in God. And so that's if I understood you correctly, that's an interesting way of, yeah, it's an interesting way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it's more or less like that, like just understanding the, I guess, the spiritual consequences. Of course, there's gonna be like other kind of considerations, but I think there was this very conscious understanding of how technology can alter in this very disruptive way societies. And I'm not necessarily like a utopianist in any sense. So it's not like to say like, we should have stopped at like oral tradition societies, just like hunting and in harmony with nature. I think I don't have that catastrophic view of history. I think there's as I mentioned, like something still equally valuable to life, whether it's what we're living now or through what it was lived like 4,000 or 400 years ago. Like it can always be understood on like this very uh, deep, I guess, human roots, I guess, and it is just a matter of understanding what is actually um, the role that we're expected, like in these like very particular situations. Like of course we have benefits now, like but like we are at a point where we have discovered that they are not enough to solve what we thought they would. Like we live like in one of the most comfortable material times of human life, and we have technology to make earth a paradise, and I don't think nobody is that, like happy about like the way things are going anymore, right? So like it's this really interesting turn point where the promises that were made like 100 years ago through science of making like paradise on Earth, we are at the point where we're like almost everybody's convinced that yeah, that's not going to happen. Like even in like the best countries, like even like if you live like the best, like life, I think people have found it kind of shallow and like and directionless, I guess. Like it's not even just
Yeah.
a matter of utopia.
Yeah, it's I also wonder if it's like this swing of individualism and kind of like not necessarily collectivism, but kind of more, I think there has been, especially in the, um, my daughters are home now. I don't know if you could hear the they're starting to fight. So they but it's been this. You had this because I think of like at least in the U.S. you had these like the 1960s, which is really just this rejection of the kind of 1950s kind of everybody like a strong family. What people at least want to remember as the strong family, and then you have since the 60s is really big push into individualism, and you know it's funny because like all those things, even we were talking about at the beginning, where it's like this kind of disconnected from the local areas with technology kind of making these kind of connections, do have these benefits where you can find these communities of people that are so niche that would not exist in a physical spot. So that in one sense is great. On the other hand, we've traded that for these very local, very physical connections. Like, we no longer have this church painter and things that you were referencing before. And I just wonder, yeah, like kind of thinking also that like this aspect of just this wave of like we've rejected the kind of I like in Slovakia and 100 years ago they used to live where three generations would live in one house, right? So this is all the houses were built so you had the families would rotate and they're comparatively very small houses, and so we've gone away from that and embraced this very individual, do your own thing, go live apart from your parents and all these kind of things. But there's trade-offs with that. You can't, very difficult, I I think I've been realizing because been very much a fan of the individual aspect, but especially since having a family now, there are nice aspects to that. And yeah, I think just to really kind of like summarize, I think what we've been exploring is like you have these kind of balance, right? Everything up here has been like we push to one end, you kind of explore as much as you can in this one area, whether it's art, AI, technology, whatever, and you get to this point where the gravitational field kind of has to okay, you've gone too far. You're really in a dangerous spot. Like you've explored it, that's great, perfect, have fun, but now you're really out there and we got to like suck you back in, and then it's just really you slingshot back the other way, and I think that's really that's the takeaway I'm taking, I think, from our conversation today is just really kind of trying to know where you're at on that line of I'm on either one extreme or the other. Just understand, okay, we're here right now, we're going in this direction, but then have the kind of intuition and the thing to like know when to pull it back and know. And I think that's really, I think if we're talking to you today, Benno, that's what I'm going to try to carry forward, this idea of balance in this perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for me great because it's such a simple thing, and at the same time, it's such a powerful thing to integrate just in terms of us individuals, as I mentioned at the beginning. Like we have all these almost contradictory aspects to ourselves, but also in society, as we now like transition after this amazing talk, we're at the 3 hour mark. So let's wrap it up with like this. Hopefully it did came out as this balanced whole as we went through art, technology, personal experience, all of these aspects, like this notion, like broaden our horizons, learn to see, like that, like yeah, that we need to, as individuals, as a society, things can never be like just I guess that simple, that saying just like the individual is right, just like the community is right, just like emotions are right, or rationalism, all these aspects, that's the complexity of human life, right? To learn to balance it all together, and as long as we were able to recognize that and try to find it in ourselves and in our close communities, I think we are all in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect summary. So yeah, the Benno, it's been an absolute pleasure. I can't believe the time has chased us so far. So it was an absolutely great conversation, and yeah, I gotta see what my daughters are up to. They're causing some ruckus, but so we found the nice natural endpoint. But yeah, super. I really like just it was a great idea. I like I said, your collaborative effort. This is I wish you more of these, and I would love to hear from other voices. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for coming on, and hopefully we can talk again. Like it feels like it could have gone forever without the help of your daughter. So like, thanks for coming, and thanks everybody for listening. And goodbye.
Bye.